Hey guys, so I have got a story for you today that still makes my stomach clench into a cold, hard, not every time I think about it. It is one of those things that started so innocently, so perfectly, that when it finally unraveled, it felt like the entire world was pulling apart at the seams around me. You know how it is when you are in your late 20s, maybe early 30s, and you feel like you have finally got your life together. You've got a decent job, a nice apartment, and you are just looking for that person to share it all with. That was me about 2 years ago. I would have been dating Mark for about 6 months when he asked me to move in, and honestly, it felt like a dream come true. He was everything I thought I wanted: tall, dark hair, a smile that could disarm a bomb, and eyes that just made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He was charming, attentive, and incredibly sweet. He would bring me flowers for no reason, remember little details about my day, and always knew how to make me laugh. We had that kind of effortless chemistry that you see in movies, and I was absolutely, head over heels convinced I would found the one. His house was a beautiful old Victorian, a little out of the city, nestled among some big oak trees. It had character, high ceilings, intricate crown molding, and a real sense of history. He would own it for a few years, and he would done a lot of work on himself, which I found incredibly attractive. It spoke to his dedication, his ability to create and nurture something. I packed up my tiny apartment, said goodbye to my roommates, and moved my life into his. It was a huge step, one I was genuinely thrilled about. For the first few weeks, it was pure bliss. We were in that honeymoon phase of living together, discovering each other's quirks, laughing over who left their socks where. I spent my days unpacking, organizing, and trying to make the house feel like ours, not just his. Mark was great about it. Let me redecorate, pick out new furniture, even gave me free reign in the kitchen, which was a big deal for him, as he loved to cook. My side of the master closet was a decent size, but Mark's side was, well, it was overflowing. He had a lot of clothes, which I figured was just part of his stylish persona. Suits, casual wear, workout gear was all neatly arranged, color-coded even, which surprised me given his generally relaxed attitude about clutter. One Saturday, while Mark was out running errands, I decided to tackle his side of the closet. I figured I could help him prune some of the older stuff, maybe organize it even better. I am a bit of a neat freak. I will admit, I started pulling out shirts, folding sweaters, and sorting through his ties. Everything was perfectly normal. Then, I noticed a section of the closet, tucked away behind a stack of his winter coats, that I had not really paid attention before. It was a separate, narrower section, almost like a hidden compartment built into the wall. I figured it was just extra storage, maybe for old paperwork or something. I pulled back the coats, and that is when I saw them. The clothes were not his. They were women's clothes. My first thought was, oh, maybe his sister left some stuff here. Mark had mentioned he had a sister who lived out of state, but he rarely talked about her. Still, it seemed like the most logical explanation. I started pulling them out, one by one, to see if I could make sense of it. But the more I looked, the less sense it made. There was a delicate vintage-style lace dress, a bit yellow with age, but clearly expensive. Then a vibrant modern cocktail dress, a size I knew was not mine. A pair of perfectly tailored business slacks, a silk blouse, a casual denim skirt, a simple cotton sundress, and shoes. So many shoes. High heels, flats, sandals, boots, all different sizes, different styles. They were not just a random assortment of hand-me-downs. They were curated. Each item seemed to tell a different story, belonged to a different person. And none of them, absolutely none, looked like they belonged to Mark's sister, based on the few photos I would seen of her. There were even some pieces that looked like they belonged to a much older woman, maybe his mother. But he had told me his mother had passed away years ago, and he had not mentioned her having lived here. I felt a prickle of unease. It was not a huge alarm bell yet, more like a tiny, insistent buzzing in the back of my mind. Why would he keep all these? And why were they hidden so deliberately? I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was overthinking things, that there was a perfectly logical explanation. Maybe he volunteered at a thrift store, or he was helping a friend clean out an estate. But the way they were arranged, almost lovingly, not just tossed in a pile for donation, was unsettling. When Mark got back, he found me sitting on the floor of the closet, surrounded by a rainbow of women's garments. His smile faltered for a second, just a fraction of a second, before he quickly recovered. "Oh, hey, what are you doing in here, babe?" he asked, his voice a little too casual, a little too bright. "Hey," I said, trying to sound nonchalant, holding up a delicate silk scarf. "I was just trying to organize your side of the closet, and I found all this." "Whose are they?" "Your sisters." He chuckled, a short, almost nervous sound. "Oh, those old things. Yeah, that is my sister's stuff. She left it here years ago after a bad breakup. Said she would pick it up someday. You know how it is? I just have not gotten around to taking it to Goodwill." He moved past me, quickly gathering a few of the dresses and stuffing them back into the hidden section. His movements were a little too hurried, a little too dismissive. "Wow, she left a lot." I commented, watching him. "And such a variety. Are these all hers?" He avoided my gaze, still shoving clothes back. "Yeah, she has always been a bit of a shopaholic. You know, different phases. Do not worry about it. Honey, just leave him. I will get to it eventually." He kissed my forehead, a quick, almost a perfunctory kiss, and then changed the subject, asking about dinner plans. I let it go. What else could I do? He would give me an explanation, and while it felt a little flimsy, it was not outright suspicious. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I needed to trust him. But the image of those clothes, the sheer volume and variety, kept nagging at me. It was like a little splinter under my skin that I could not quite dig out. Over the next few weeks, that splinter grew into a dull ache. I started noticing other things. Small, almost imperceptible shifts in Mark's behavior. He became a little more possessive, a little more watchful. If I went out with friends, he would text me constantly, asking when I would be home. If I spent too long on my phone, he would ask who I was talking to, his voice light, but his eyes intense. I chalked it up to him being deeply in love, maybe a little insecure, but it still felt heavy. One evening, I could not find my favorite delicate silver necklace, the one my grandmother had given me. I searched everywhere: my jewelry box, my dresser, even the bathroom counter. It was nowhere. I asked Mark if he had seen it. He just shrugged. "No, babe. Sorry. Are you sure you did not leave it at your friend's place?" I was positive I had not. It was a small thing, but it added to the growing list of unexplained occurrences. A few weeks later, a pair of my favorite earrings went missing. Then a specific, very comfortable sweater. Each time, Mark had no explanation, and sometimes he would even subtly imply I was being forgetful or careless. It was a classic case of gaslighting, though I did not recognize it at the time. I just felt like I was losing my mind, questioning my own memory. The house, which had once felt so warm and inviting, slowly started to feel heavy. The quiet moments, when Mark was at work, began to feel less peaceful and more isolating. I would sometimes catch myself jumping at shadows, or hearing faint creaks and whispers that I would dismiss as the old house settling. But they felt different, more deliberate. One afternoon, about a month after the initial discovery, Mark was away on a business trip. He would be gone for 3 days. I was alone in the house, and the quiet was deafening. That nagging feeling about the closet had intensified. I could not shake it. I knew it was irrational, but I felt an overwhelming urge to go back, to look again, to confirm or deny my growing unease. I walked into our bedroom, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I pulled back the heavy winter coats, revealing the narrow section of the closet. The clothes were still there, neatly arranged. I reached in, pulling out a delicate floral pattern dress. It was a size 0, impossibly small. Definitely not Mark's sister, who was a much larger build. And then I noticed it, tucked into the pocket of the dress, almost invisible against the patterned fabric, was a small, tarnished silver locket. It was old, etched with an intricate design. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, on one side, was a tiny, faded photograph of a young woman with bright, laughing eyes. On the other side, a small, handwritten date 071408. My blood ran cold. This was not just old clothes from a sister. This was something else entirely. The woman in the photo was beautiful, but she looked nothing like Mark's sister. And the date, it felt significant. A date of arrival. A date of departure. The question burned in my mind, a terrifying ember. I started pulling out more items, meticulously searching. In the lining of a tweed skirt, I found a small, embroidered handkerchief with an initial E. In the pocket of a pair of jeans, a crumpled cinema ticket stub from 5 years ago. Each item felt like a breadcrumb, leading me down a path I desperately did not want to follow. Then I noticed something else. The back wall of this hidden section of the closet. It was not solid like the rest of the closet. It was slightly recessed, and along the very bottom, almost imperceptible unless you were looking for it, was a faint line like a seam. My fingers traced it, feeling a slight give. It was not a solid wall. It was a door. Panic began to bubble up, thick and acrid in my throat. Every horror movie I would ever seen flashed through my mind. Secret rooms. Hidden passages. This was the stuff of nightmares. But this was my life, my home. My perfect, charming boyfriend's home. I pushed against the seam, gently at first, then with more force. It did not budge. I ran my hands along the edges, searching for a latch, a handle, anything. My fingers brushed against a small, almost invisible button, flush with the wall, hidden beneath a strip of trim. I pressed it. With a soft click, the section of the wall swung inward, revealing a gap, a dark, narrow opening. A wave of cold, stale air, heavy with the scent of dust and something vaguely metallic, washed over me. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought it would burst out of my chest. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to close it, to pretend I would never seen it. But a morbid curiosity, a desperate need to know, propelled me forward. I reached for my phone, but it was still charging downstairs. I did not dare go get it. I grabbed one of Mark's heavy-duty flashlights from a shelf in the closet, clicked it on, and shone the beam into the darkness. It was not a small compartment. It was a room, a narrow, rectangular room, stretching back into the shadows. And what I saw inside, it made my blood run to ice. The walls of the room were lined with shelves, and on those shelves were more clothes. Hundreds of them. Dresses, skirts, blouses, coats, all meticulously folded or hung on individual hangers. But these were not just random clothes. Each section of the shelf was labeled. Small, neat labels with names and dates. Eleanor 2008, 2009. Chloe 2011, 2012. Bethany 2014, 2015. And below the clothes, on separate shelves, were boxes. Clear, plastic boxes, each labeled with the same names and dates. I picked up one labeled Eleanor. Inside, carefully arranged on a bed of tissue paper, were personal effects. A small, delicate silver watch. A pair of reading glasses. A worn leather-bound diary. A collection of pressed flowers. A single, dark strand of hair tied with a ribbon. This was not a collection. This was a shrine. A macabre museum of lives. My gaze traveled further into the room. In the very center, bathed in the beam of my flashlight, stood 3 mannequins. They were not the standard store display mannequins. These were high-end, lifelike figures, with realistic hair and carefully painted features. Each one was dressed in a full outfit from the shelves, complete with shoes, jewelry, and even a wig that matched the hair in the boxes. One was dressed in the vintage lace dress I would seen earlier, the one with the locket. Her face, eerily realistic, was painted with a gentle smile. I stumbled back, gasping for breath, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle a scream. This was not just a collector. This was a monster. Mark was not just keeping old clothes, he was keeping memories. He was curating entire identities. And those dates, they were not just dates. They were timelines. The span of time he had been obsessed with these women. Or, God forbid, the span of time they had been with him. My flashlight beam, shaking uncontrollably, swept across the room again. And then I saw it. On a workbench pushed against the far wall, illuminated in the harsh light, were tools. Not carpentry tools. Surgical tools. Scalpels, clamps, various other instruments I could not identify, but instantly recognized as sinister. And next to them, a series of photographs. They were photos of women. Smiling, vibrant women. Then, photos of the same women, looking increasingly gaunt, their eyes wide with terror, their smiles gone. And finally, photos of the women after. Their bodies posed, dressed in the very clothes I had just seen on the mannequins, their faces pale and lifeless. Each set of photos was labeled with name and those chilling dates. My stomach heaved. I clamped my hand over my mouth, fighting back the bile rising in my throat. He was a serial killer. My charming, attentive Mark, the man I loved, was a monster who collected women, not just their clothes, but their entire lives, meticulously documented, preserved, and then displayed. The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Then my flashlight beam landed on something else, something that made a cold, primal scream tear through my mind. On a fourth mannequin, still undressed, lay a pile of clothes. My clothes. The silver necklace my grandmother had given me. My favorite earrings. The comfortable sweater that had gone missing. They were all there, neatly folded, waiting. And next to them, a small, handwritten label. It simply read Sarah in progress. The world tilted. My vision swam. He was not just collecting. He was planning. He was building my display. He had been studying me, observing me, collecting pieces of my life, preparing me for my inevitable departure. A sudden, sharp sound from downstairs, the front door opening. Mark was home. His trip was supposed to last 3 days. He was back early. My heart seized. He was home, and I was trapped in his secret room, surrounded by the ghosts of his victims, facing my own terrifying future. I yanked the door shut, fumbling for the hidden button, my fingers slick with sweat. It clicked back into place, sealing the horrors within. My mind raced, a chaotic storm of terror and adrenaline. I had to get out. Now, I scrambled out of the closet, pulling the heavy coats back into place to conceal the hidden door. My breath came in ragged gasps. I could hear Mark's footsteps on the stairs, slow and deliberate. He was coming up. I had seconds. My phone, downstairs. I needed it. I needed to call for help, but I could not go downstairs. He was there. I looked around the bedroom, desperate. The window, reinforced. I remembered him saying, for security. It was on the second floor, a long drop, but it was my only option. I heard his footsteps stop outside the bedroom door. A soft click. He was trying to handle. It was locked. I always locked it when I was alone. Sarah, babe, you in there. His voice was like casual, but there was an edge to it now, a subtle shift that I had not noticed before, but now screamed predator. I did not answer. I grabbed the heavy armchair by the window, my muscles screaming in protest, and dragged it towards the glass. I had to break it. I needed to attract attention. Sarah, why is the door locked? His voice was closer now, muffled by the wood. He was leaning against the door. Is everything okay? I got back early, surprised you. I ignored him, pushing with all my might against the armchair. It was heavy, but adrenaline lent me a strength I did not know I possessed. I needed something to shatter the glass. I glanced wildly around the room. A small, heavy ceramic vase on the dresser. I can hear you. Sarah, Mark's voice was low, almost a whisper, directly outside the door. What are you doing? I lunged for the vase, my hand shaking so violently I almost dropped it. I ran back to the window, the armchair now in place, and hoisted the vase above my head. Sarah, open this door. Now. The command in his voice was chilling, devoid of the charm he usually wore. I swung the vase with all my might, aiming for the center of the window. The glass, thick and reinforced, did not shatter. It cracked, a spiderweb of lines spreading outwards, but it held. A loud crash from the door. He was kicking it. The wood groaned under the impact. I hit the window again, and again, the ceramic vase chipping, my hands raw. The cracks deepened, but it still would not break through. It was designed to withstand a lot. The door splintered. With a final, sickening crunch, the lock gave way, and the door burst open. Mark stood there, his face no longer smiling. His eyes, usually so warm and inviting, were cold, calculating, utterly devoid of emotion. He looked like a hunter who had finally cornered his prey. What are you doing? Sarah, he asked, his voice flat, eerily calm despite the destroyed door. He stepped into the room, his gaze fixed on me, on the broken window, on the vase in my trembling hands. He had not seen the closet. Not yet. I dropped the vase. My mind was a whirlwind. He knew. He must have known I found something. I heard a noise. I stammered, my voice a pathetic croak. I thought someone was breaking in. He took another step closer, his eyes narrowing. A noise. And you try to break my reinforced window with a vase. That is not very convincing. Sarah, he glanced towards the closet, his eyes lingering for a moment, and a flicker of something suspicion, recognition, crossed his face. I was scared. I whispered, backing away, my hands up in a futile gesture of defense. He stopped a few feet from me. You found it. Did not you, he said, his voice still low, but now with an undercurrent of something deeply sinister. The closet. The room. I could not speak. I could only nod, tears streaming down my face. He let out a sigh, a sound of resignation, almost disappointment. I knew I should have gotten rid of Eleanor's locket. Careless of me, but it was her favorite. Such a beautiful piece. He looked at me, a strange, almost clinical expression on his face. You know, Sarah, you have a very similar bone structure to Bethany. I was going to try a few of her outfits on you. See how they fit. My blood ran cold again. He was not mad. He was analyzing, planning. Please, Mark. I pleaded, my voice barely audible. Let me go. I won't tell anyone. I promise. He chuckled softly, a chilling sound without humor. Oh, Sarah, my dear, that is not how this works. You are in progress. We are just getting to the exciting part. You are going to be my masterpiece. The culmination of all, my work. He took another step, slowly, deliberately, like a cat stalking a mouse. You are going to fit perfectly into the collection. I saw my opportunity. The door was open. He was focused on me, on his twisted fantasy. With a surge of adrenaline, I bolted. I pushed past him, a scream tearing from my throat, and sprinted out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and toward the front door. He was fast. I heard his heavy footsteps thundering behind me. I fumbled with the deadbolt, my fingers clumsy with terror. It clicked open. I threw the door open and burst out into the cool evening air, not looking back, not caring where I was going. I ran. I ran like I had never run before, down the long gravel driveway, through the trees, my lungs burning, my legs aching, the sound of his footsteps fading behind me. I did not stop until I reached the main road, until I saw the distant glow of streetlights, until I could hear the faint hum of traffic. I ran to the first house I saw with lights on, hammered on the door, sobbing, incoherent, a terrified mess. The kind family that answered called the police, and I tried to explain, tried to articulate the horror I had just witnessed. They were skeptical at first, but when the police arrived and went to Mark's house, they found the splintered door, the broken window, and, eventually, the hidden room. Mark was not there. He was gone. He had vanished. The police found evidence. The clothes, the boxes, the mannequins, the photographs, the tools. They identified the women from the photos and the labels, linking them to cold cases of missing persons stretching back over a decade. Eleanor, Chloe, Bethany, all of them. And my own items laid out, waiting for me. I never saw Mark again. He was never caught. The police issued a nationwide manhunt, but he had simply disappeared. It has been 2 years, and I still look over my shoulder constantly. Every new face, every polite smile, every charming gesture makes me flinch. I moved across the country, changed my name, try to start over. But the image of that hidden room, the faces of those women, and the mannequin waiting for Sarah in progress, it is burned into my mind. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I swear I can still smell the stale air of that hidden room, hear the soft click of a latch, or feel the phantom weight of a delicate silver locket in my hand. He is still out there. I know it. And somewhere, someone else might be falling for his charm, unaware that they are about to become the next meticulously curated piece in his horrifying collection. And that, guys, is the real nightmare. Hey, guys. So last time, I told you about Mark. The guy I thought was the one. The kind of perfect, charming man you dream about, with a smile that could melt glaciers and a laugh that made you feel like everything was right in the world. After 6 blissful months, I moved into his beautiful Victorian home, head over heels in love. I thought I would found my forever. But then, things started getting weird. That perfect veneer began to crack. It started small, with a hidden compartment in his closet, full of women's clothes, a curated collection of different styles and sizes, none belonging to his sister, despite his flimsy explanation. A tiny, insistent buzz of unease started in my gut. Over weeks, that buzz grew into a dull throb. My own stuff started mysteriously vanishing, my favorite silver necklace, a pair of earrings I rarely took off, a soft cashmere sweater he would complimented once. Mark became possessive, watchful, his eyes following me a little too closely sometimes. He subtly gaslit me, making me question my own memory, my own sanity. "Are you sure you put it there, sweetheart?" he would say, his voice laser concern, but his eyes, they held something else. The house, which had once felt so welcoming, now felt heavy, suffocating. While Mark was on a business trip, my unease became unbearable. I could not sleep, could not eat. Every shadow seemed to stretch. Every creak of the old house sounded like footsteps. I knew deep down I had to go back to that hidden closet. And I did. I found a locket with a stranger's photo and a date etched on the back. A date that was too recent to be an old flame, too close to home. And then, the real kicker, a secret door in the back wall. It was almost perfectly concealed, blending with the old wood paneling. But once you knew it was there, you could not unsee it. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my hand hovering over the cold wood. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to leave the house, to never look back. But a more primal urge, a desperate need for answers, for truth, held me rooted to the spot. My heart was pounding like a drum solo in my chest, a frantic rhythm against the chilling silence of the empty house. Mark was miles away, or so I hoped. This was my chance. With a shaky breath, I pushed the door. It did not creak or groan, like an old door should. It swung inward with an unnerving smoothness, revealing not a musty old storage space, but a narrow, dark passage. And from that passage, a smell hit me. It was not just dust or old wood. It was heavier, stale, metallic, like old blood maybe, or something long dead and forgotten. My blood ran cold, just like I told you. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might throw up right there. I fumbled for my phone, the screen a stark, artificial beacon in the oppressive darkness. The passage was short, leading into a small, windowless room, no bigger than a walk-in closet itself. As the phone's flashlight cut through the gloom, what it illuminated made my breath hitch in my throat. This was not just storage. This was something else entirely. The walls were bare, painted a dull, sickly yellow, peeling in places. The air was thick, heavy, like breathing through a wet cloth. And the silence, oh God, the silence was deafening, broken only by the frantic hammering of my own heart. My gaze swept across the room, taking in the details that solidified the horrifying truth. On one wall, crudely tacked up, were photographs. Not happy family photos, not scenic landscapes. These were pictures of women, different women, some smiling, some looking candid, some looking afraid. And below each photo, a small handwritten note, a name, a date, and then a series of symbols I could not quite decipher, but that looked disturbingly like progression, like stages. My eyes landed on one face, and my stomach dropped through the floorboards. It was a woman from the locket I would found in the hidden compartment. Her name was Sarah, and the date next to her photo was just under 2 years ago. My blood ran cold again, a deep, bone-chilling cold that seemed to seep into my very marrow. On a low, makeshift shelf, I saw a stack of familiar items. Wallets, driver's licenses, purses, all belonging to the women in the photos. And amongst them, nestled carefully as if preserved, were those very specific pieces of clothing I would found in the hidden compartment in Mark's main closet. The red silk dress, the emerald green blouse, the delicate lace camisole. These were not just trophies. They were souvenirs, evidence. My breath hitched. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped my phone. This was not a collection. This was a graveyard of stolen lives. Then I saw it. In the corner of the room, almost hidden by shadow, was a small, cot-like bed. It was a metal frame, thin mattress, covered with a stained, threadbare blanket. Above it, attached to the wall, was a single, bare light bulb, controlled by a switch near the makeshift bed. And next to the bed, on a small, rickety nightstand, was a leather-bound journal. My hands trembled as I reached for it. It was heavy, and as I opened it, the pages were filled with Mark's neat, elegant handwriting. But the words were anything but elegant. They were meticulous, chillingly detailed accounts. Dates, times, observations. Descriptions of the women. Their habits. Their fears. Their progress. I skimmed through, my eyes blurring, trying to make sense of the horror. He documented everything. How he met them, how he charmed them, how he brought them to the house. He described their personalities, their reactions, their breaking points. He even had a system, a numbering. Sarah was victim 3. My mind reeled. How many were there? My gaze drifted back to the photos. I started counting. My blood ran colder with each number. Sarah was just one of many. And then a horrifying thought pierced through the fog of my terror. My things, my silver necklace, my earrings, my sweater. They were not just missing. They were gone. Stolen. My eyes darted back to the shelf, searching frantically. And there they were. My silver necklace, carefully coiled, laid out next to a pair of tarnished hoop earrings that looked suspiciously like mine. And underneath them, folded neatly, was my soft cashmere sweater, the one he would complimented. A choke sob escaped my lips. He had not just taken them. He would collected them, like he collected everything else from these women. My items were here, in this room of horrors, mingling with the remnants of his previous victims. I was not just a girlfriend. I was a project. I was next. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I scrambled back, pressing myself against the wall, trying to create distance from the journal, the photos, the truth. He had not just been watching me. He had been planning. He had been cataloging me, just like he had cataloged Sarah and all the others. I remembered his subtle questions, his innocent observations. You sleep so soundly, sweetheart. You are not a restless sleeper, are you? Do you ever have trouble sleeping when I am gone? He was not just making conversation. He was gathering data. Data for this. Panic, raw and unadulterated, seized me. I had to get out. I had to leave. But where? And what if he came back? He was supposed to be on a business trip. But what if that was a lie? What if he was closer than I thought? What if he knew I was here, in this room? My eyes darted around the small, suffocating space. My phone battery icon was blinking red. I had to move, and I had to move fast. My mind was a whirlwind of terror and desperate calculation. I needed to get to my car. My keys. I needed to call the police. But first, I needed to make sure I was not leaving anything behind that would tip him off that I knew. I gently, carefully closed the journal. I put it back exactly where I found it. I did not touch anything else. My heart was still slamming against my ribs, but a cold, hard resolve was starting to form. I had to be smart. I had to be silent. As I backed out of the secret room, my eyes caught something else on the floor near the cot. A small laminated card. It was not one of the victim's IDs. It was a blueprint, a floor plan of the house. And circled in red, with an ominous X over it, was my bedroom. My blood ran cold for the third, fourth, fifth time. It was not just a plan for me in general. It was a plan specifically for my space, for my room. An icy dread spread through me, chilling me to the bone. What could be so important about my room? What could he possibly have planned for there? My breath hitched. I remembered his strange obsession with my bed. How he always made it perfectly, even when I would only just gotten up. How he would sometimes linger in my room, tidying things, even when I was not there. I would thought it was sweet, a sign of his affection. Now, it felt like a predator marking its territory. Without another thought, I slipped out of the secret room, carefully pulling the hidden door shut behind me, trying to make sure it clicked into place exactly as it had been. I did not even bother closing the main closet door. My mind was fixated on that red X on the blueprint. My room, my bed. I moved through the house like a ghost, every shadow a potential threat, every creak of the old floorboards a scream in my ears. The beautiful Victorian home now felt like a mausoleum, a meticulously crafted trap. I did not dare turn on any lights. The faint light from the windows was enough, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock my terror. Up the grand staircase I went, my bare feet silent on the plush carpet. My room, my sanctuary. Now, a place of unspeakable dread. I pushed the door open slowly, cautiously, my phone flashlight trembling in my hand. The room looked normal. Too normal. The floral wallpaper, the antique dresser, the four-poster bed with its soft duvet. It was all facade. I walked straight to the bed, my eyes scanning every inch, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pulled back the duvet, then the sheets, then the mattress pad. Nothing, just the pristine white mattress. Was I wrong? Was I just imagining things, letting the terror get to me? Then I remembered something. Mark had insisted on putting down a new, thick rug in my room shortly after I moved in. For extra warmth, he would said, with that charming smile. It was a beautiful Persian rug, deep reds and blues, covering almost the entire floor. My heart sank. My hands flew to the edge of the rug, my fingers digging into the thick pile. It was heavy, too heavy. I tugged, pulling it back from the corner nearest the headboard. And there it was. My phone's beam illuminated the polished oak floorboards underneath. But it was not just floorboards. Two heavy, dark metal plates were screwed securely into the wood, just big enough to cover a small area. And attached to each plate, a thick, brutal-looking metal shackle. They were not old, rusty things. These were new, gleaming, designed to hold, designed to restrain. One was positioned perfectly where a person's left ankle would be, the other where their right wrist would rest if they were lying on the bed, or maybe both ankles if they were positioned differently. My mind reeled, trying to process the implications. He had not just been planning. He had been preparing. For me, in my bed, a guttural cry, half a scream, half a sob, tore from my throat. It was raw, animalistic. The air in my lungs felt like ice. He had installed these. He had hidden them. He had made my bed, knowing what he intended to do to me in it. Every night I had slept there, I had been inches away from this horror. Every morning, he had smiled at me, knowing. I stumbled back, tripping over the pulled-up rug, landing hard on the floor. The cold shackle glinted in the phone's light, a silent, terrifying testament to his depravity. My mind raced, images flashing Sarah, the other women, their faces, their dates. And then me, my face, my date, my end. I had to get out. Now, this was not just a sick game. This was real. And I was in his house, alone, with a monster who was probably already on his way back. My phone was still clutched in my hand, the battery icon now a frantic, blinking red. I had called for help. But who? And how would I explain this? My boyfriend is shackles under my bed, in a secret room full of dead women's things. I would think I was crazy. He was so charming, so believable. He would gaslight the police, just like he gaslit me. No, I could not call. I had to escape. I scrambled to my feet, my legs wobbly, my whole body trembling. I looked around the room, desperate for anything. My purse, my keys, my car was parked outside. If I could just get to it. I grabbed my purse from the dresser, shoving my phone inside. Keys. Where were my keys? I always left them on my bedside table, but they were not there. I checked the dresser drawers. Nothing. My heart leaped into my throat. He must have taken them. He must have known I might try to leave. A cold dread seeped into me. He had thought of everything. I ran to the door, fumbling with the doorknob. Locked? No, it was not locked from the inside, but it would not turn. I yanked, pushed, pulled. Nothing. It was stuck. Or it was locked from the outside. A chill, worse than anything I had felt so far, shot through me. He had not just taken my keys. He had ensured I could not leave my room. He knew I would find it. He had set this up. He had left the secret room door slightly ajar, maybe, or left to lock it out. He was playing with me. He was waiting. My breath hitched. I could hear it now. A faint sound from downstairs. A creak. A thud. It was not the house settling. It was too deliberate. Too heavy. He was home. My blood ran so cold it felt like ice in my veins. He was not on a business trip. He had been here, watching, waiting for me to find his secrets. And now he was coming for me. I backed away from the door, my eyes wide, darting around the room, searching for an escape, a weapon, anything. The window. My room was on the second floor. It was a long drop, but better than what awaited me in this house. I rushed to the window, fumbling with the latch. It was old, stiff. My fingers, numb with terror, struggled to open it. I could hear footsteps on the stairs now, slow, deliberate. Each thud echoed in my chest, shaking me to my core. Sweetheart. Mark's voice, calm and even, drifted up from downstairs. Are you in your room? I thought I heard something. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it would burst. He sounded so normal, so loving, so utterly, completely terrifying. I finally got the latch open, pushing the window up with a desperate grunt. The cool night air rushed in. A brief moment of relief before the realization hit me. There was no fire escape, no sturdy tree branch. Just a sheer drop to the rose bushes below. I am coming up, love. Mark called out, his voice closer now, just outside my door. Did you have a bad dream? My eyes darted to the shackles under bed, then to the open window. There was no time. This was it. I had to jump. But as I braced myself, a new sound reached my ears. Not Mark's footsteps. Not his voice. It was a faint, high-pitched whirring, coming from inside the room. My gaze snapped to the corner of the ceiling. A small, almost invisible red light was blinking. A camera. He had cameras. Everywhere. He had been watching me the entire time. Watching me find a secret room. Watching me find the shackles. Watching me try to escape. He had not been on a business trip. He had been here. In the house. And he had been enjoying every single minute of my terror. The doorknob rattled. A soft click. And then the door slowly, silently began to open. I froze, caught between the open window and the opening door. My heart stopped. I could not breathe. I could not move. The sliver of a shadow appeared in the gap of the door. And then his voice, no longer soft, no longer charming. Cold, hard. Found them. Did you? Sweetheart, he purred. Took you long enough. The last thing I remember seeing was his smile. It was not the charming smile I would fallen in love with. It was a predator's smile. Wide, knowing, and utterly, completely devoid of anything human. And then the darkness. You know, I always thought I had a pretty good read on people. I have been through my share of bad dates, the kind that make you want to throw your phone into a volcano, but I always figured I could spot a real red flag from a mile away. Turns out, some red flags are just different shades, and sometimes they are wrapped up in a package so charming, so seemingly honest, you almost convince yourself they are not red at all. It all started, as so many modern-day disasters do, with a dating app. I was in my late 20s, tired of the usual grind, and honestly, a little jaded. Swipe left, swipe right on a decent-looking guy who probably only wants a hookup. It was exhausting. I was about ready to delete the whole thing when I matched with Leo. His profile picture was a candid shot of him laughing, hiking in what looked like a national park. He had kind eyes, a strong jawline, and a smile that seemed genuinely warm. His bio was witty and intelligent, and did not contain a single fish picture miracle in my book. We started chatting, and it was effortless. He was smart, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. We talked about books, travel, our favorite obscure documentaries. It was refreshing, to say the least. After a week of non-stop texting, we decided to meet for coffee. I remember feeling a flutter of nerves, but mostly excitement. He was even better in person. Taller than I expected, with a calm, confident demeanor. He had dark, slightly wavy hair that fell just so, and those same kind eyes. The conversation flowed, even more easily than over text. We spent hours talking, laughing, completely losing track of time. He walked me to my car, and I felt a genuine spark, a feeling I had not experienced in a long time. We went on a second date, then a third. Each one felt like a dream. He was attentive, chivalrous, and made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. He seemed almost too good to be true, and I found myself cautiously optimistic. I started to let my guard down, something I rarely did. It was during our fourth date. over dimly lit Italian food that he brought it up. We were talking about hobbies, and I would just finish describing my slightly embarrassing obsession with true crime podcasts. He chuckled, then leaned forward, a slight, almost shy smile playing on his lips. Well, he began, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. I have a hobby that some people find a little unusual. My heart gave a little skip. This was it. I thought he collects action figures, or he is secretly a furry, or he lives with his mom and has 17 cats. I braced myself, ready to laugh it off and move on if it was something truly bizarre. I collect hair, he said, his gaze steady, almost expectant. I blinked. You collect hair. I repeated, my brain trying to process the words. It was not what I expected. Not action figures. Not cats. Hair. He nodded, still smiling. Yes, human hair. I know, it sounds a bit odd, right? But I find it fascinating. The sheer variety, the textures, the colors. Each strand is like a tiny, unique fiber holding so much of a person's essence. It is beautiful in its own way. He went on to explain it, his words carefully chosen, articulate. He talked about it as an artistic pursuit, a scientific curiosity. He was not talking about collecting hair from drains or barbershops. He assured me. He explained how he admired the beauty of human hair, how he sometimes asked friends, or even respectful strangers, if he could have a small snip, just a few strands, for his collection. He said he organized them, sometimes even used them in abstract art pieces. He was so earnest, so open about it, that it almost disarmed me. My initial reaction was a mix of okay, that is weird, and he is being so upfront about it. Maybe it is not that bad. I mean, sure, it was definitely unusual, but he was not hiding it. He was laying it all out there, almost like a test, to see if I would be weirded out. And in a strange way, his honesty made it seem less sinister. Like, if he were some kind of creeper, would not he keep that a secret? I remember forcing a small laugh. Wow, okay. That is definitely unique. So, like, do you have a whole room dedicated to it? Like a hair museum? He laughed, a genuine warm sound. Not quite a museum. No, more like a very organized cabinet. I mostly just appreciate it for its aesthetic qualities. It is a very personal thing, for me, a quiet hobby. We talked about it for a bit longer. He explained how he appreciated the different ways hair could be styled, the way light caught it. He even mentioned how he found my hair particularly striking that rich auburn shade. It is just so vibrant. I felt a blush creep up my neck, a mix of flattered and slightly unnerved. But he quickly steered the conversation back to something more conventional, and the weirdness of it faded into background, replaced by the warmth of his smile and the easy flow of our conversation. Looking back now, I can see how perfectly he played it. He presented his hobby as a quirky, harmless fascination. He was so charming, so intelligent, and otherwise so perfect that I rationalized it away. Everyone has their quirks, right? Maybe this was just his, and he was so open about it, which surely meant he was not some kind of dangerous weirdo, right? We started spending more and more time together. He was everything I thought I wanted. Thoughtful, kind, incredibly intelligent. He remembered little details about me, brought me my favorite coffee, surprised me with thoughtful gifts. I was falling for him, hard. The hair thing still lingered in the back of my mind, a tiny, almost imperceptible prickle of unease, but was overshadowed by the sheer joy of being with him. He started complimenting my hair more often. "Your hair looks amazing today," he would say, or "I love the way the sun catches that reddish tint." It felt nice at first. Who does not like compliments? But then it became a little much. He would sometimes just stare at it, a strange, almost intense look in his eyes that would vanish as soon as I met his gaze. One evening, after dinner at his place, we were cuddling on the couch, watching a movie. He ran his fingers through my hair, a gentle, soothing gesture. But then he paused. He murmured, his voice soft. Your hair truly is exquisite. The texture, the color, it is really something special. He pulled back slightly, looking at me. Would you mind if I took a small strand from my collection? Just a single strand. I would be honored. My stomach did a little flip. This was it. The first direct request. I hesitated. It felt personal. Intimate. In a way I was not entirely comfortable with. But he was looking at me with those kind eyes, a hopeful, almost childlike expression. And I did not want to be the uptight girlfriend who could not handle his innocent hobby. Sure, I said, trying to sound casual. Just a strand, though, right? He smiled a wide, relieved smile. Of course, just a single one. Thank you, sweetheart. You are wonderful. He went to a small, ornate wooden box on his bookshelf, pulled out a pair of tiny, gleaming tweezers, and carefully, meticulously plucked a single strand of hair from my head. He held it up, examining it like a jeweler examining a diamond, before carefully placing it in a small, clear vial. He labeled it with a tiny, neat label, Sarah, 1018. He then placed the vial back in the box, which I now realized was filled with dozens of similar vials. It was a little unsettling, but I told myself it was just his quirky hobby. He was happy, and I was happy. As the weeks turned into months, my discomfort began to grow. It was not just the compliments anymore. He started making comments about my hair if I styled it differently. Oh, you straightened it today. I prefer it with your natural waves. It has more character. Or, are you thinking of cutting it? Please do not. It is perfect just as it is. It started to feel less like admiration and more like ownership. I also started noticing small things. Sometimes, after we would have been intimate, I would wake up to find him just watching me sleep. And sometimes, his hand would gently brush my hair, a little too carefully, a little too long. I would shrug it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. He just loved my hair, that is all. It was a compliment. One morning, I was getting ready for work, brushing my hair, and I noticed a small, almost imperceptible patch near my temple where the hair felt thinner. Like a tiny, perfect circle of hair was just gone. I peered close in the mirror, turning my head. It was so small, so subtle, that I almost convinced myself it was just a trick of the light. Or maybe I would pull a few strands out accidentally. I dismissed it, but the image lingered. A few days later, Leo asked for another sample. This time, he did not just want a strand. Could I maybe have a small snip? He asked, his eyes wide and earnest. Just a tiny, tiny bit from the back, where it won't be noticeable. I am working on a new art piece, and your hair will be the perfect accent. My alarm bells were ringing louder now. A snip? That felt different, more invasive. But again, he was so persuasive, so charming, and he made it sound so innocent, so artistic. I reluctantly agreed, feeling a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. He used a tiny, incredibly sharp pair of scissors he produced from his ornate wooden box, and with surgical precision, snipped a small amount of hair from the very back of my head. It was quick, clean, and he even managed to make it feel almost tender. He thanked me profusely, his eyes alight with what seemed like genuine gratitude. That evening, I could not shake the feeling of being violated. Even though I would consented, I ran my fingers over the spot where he would cut. It felt noticeably shorter. And then, I remembered the small, thin patch near my temple. Could he have taken that too, without me knowing? The thought sent a chill down my spine. I started to become hyper-aware of my hair. I would constantly touch it, check in the mirror. I started to feel like it was not just my hair anymore. It was his too, or at least a part of it was. One weekend, Leo invited me to stay over at his house for the first time. He lived in a beautiful, sprawling Victorian, tucked away on a tree-lined street. It was charming and a little bit spooky, in a good way. The interior was tastefully decorated, filled with books, art, and antique furniture. Everything felt carefully curated. As we settled in, he gave me a tour. When we got to his study, he gestured to the ornate wooden box I would seen before, sitting on a prominent shelf. And this, he said, a proud gleam in his eyes, is where I keep my most cherished specimens. I walked over, feeling a strange mix of dread and morbid curiosity. The box was larger than I remembered, intricate carvings covering its surface. He opened it, revealing not just vials, but small, neatly labeled bundles of hair, each tied with a delicate silk ribbon. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of them. Some were short, some long, some dark, some light, some curly, some straight. It was an impressive, if deeply unsettling, collection. He pointed to a few, telling me the stories behind them: a friend's first haircut, a lock from a trip abroad, a sample from an old flame. He even showed me my own vials, labeled Sarah 1018 and Sarah 1105. The second one, the snip, was a much thicker bundle than the first. It felt like a trophy. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside, I was feeling increasingly uncomfortable. This was not just a quirky hobby. This was an obsession. And seeing my own hair, neatly packaged and displayed like a specimen, made my skin crawl. Later that night, after we had gone to bed, I could not sleep. The image of the hair collection, the sheer volume of it, kept replaying in my mind. His possessive comments about my hair, the tiny missing patch, the feeling of being watched. It all started to click into place, forming a picture far more sinister than I had allowed myself to believe. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him. I told myself I was just going to the bathroom, but my feet carried me silently back to the study. The moonlight streamed to the window, casting long, eerie shadows. The wooden box sat there, a silent, menacing presence. I opened it again, my heart pounding. I picked up my second bundle, the snip. It was definitely a significant amount. Too much for an accent to an art piece. What kind of art piece required this much hair? My eyes scanned the shelves, looking for anything else. That is when I noticed a small, almost invisible seam in the back wall of the study, behind a large, antique globe. It looked like a hidden door. My breath hitched. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of that house and never look back. But a cold, desperate need for the truth, for confirmation of my worst fears, pushed me forward. I ran my fingers along the seam, searching for a latch, a handle. My fingers brushed against a small, almost hidden button. I pressed it. With a soft click, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow, dark passage. A wave of stale metallic air, tinged with something vaguely chemical, wafted out. My phone was still in the bedroom. I had no light. Panic seized me. I wanted to turn back. But then, a faint, almost imperceptible glow emanated from within the passage. I squinted. It was a soft, fluorescent light, hinting at a room beyond. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I stepped into the passage. It was short, leading into a small, windowless room. The fluorescent light hummed overhead, casting a harsh, clinical glow. The smell was stronger here, metallic, chemical, and something faintly organic and sickeningly sweet. What I saw next made my blood run cold, freezing me in place. The walls were not covered with art or books. They were lined with glass display cases, like something you would see in a natural history museum. And inside each case, meticulously arranged and labeled, were not just bundles of hair, but entire, perfectly preserved wigs. Each wig was mounted on a realistic mannequin head, complete with lifelike eyes and skin tones. There were dozens of them, of every color and style imaginable. Long, flowing locks short, sassy bobs, intricate braids. Each one was a masterpiece of human hair. Beneath each display case, a small, elegant plaque was affixed to the wall. It contained a name, a date, and a brief, chilling description. Victim 1 Jessica, acquired 0312 silky blonde. Perfect luster. Victim 2 Chloe acquired 0715 Vibrant Red. Excellent volume. Victim 3 Emily acquired 0922 Rich Brown. Beautiful waves. My eyes darted across the room, my heart hammering against my ribs. These were not just collections of hair. These were trophies. Each wig was a testament to a woman who had, at some point, been in Leo's life. And the dates, they showed a pattern. A meticulous, horrifying pattern. On a large, sterile-looking table in the center of the room lay an array of tools. Different size scissors, some incredibly fine, others heavy-duty. Combs, brushes, bottles of chemicals, preservatives, dyes, conditioning treatments. There were also several blank mannequin heads, waiting to be adorned. My gaze fell upon a small, open journal lying on the table. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was Leo's neat, elegant handwriting. The entries detailed his projects, his meticulous notes on hair types, growth patterns, and acquisition techniques. He wrote about the thrill of the hunt, the challenge of finding the perfect specimen. He described the women not as people, but as sources of his desired material. He outlined his process charming them, building trust, slowly gaining access to their hair, then ultimately taking it. All of it. My eyes scanned the pages, searching, dreading what I might find. And then I saw it. An entry dated just a few days ago. Project Sarah Auburn, exceptional vibrancy, natural wave, ideal texture. Acquisition progressing smoothly. Phase 1 complete. Anticipate Phase 2 within the week. She is the most perfect specimen yet. The crowning jewel. The journal slipped from my numb fingers, clattering to the table. Phase 1. Phase 2. The words echoed in my mind, cold and clinical. I looked at the array of tools, the empty mannequin heads, the rows of exquisite, horrifying wigs. And then I looked at my hair, cascading down my shoulders, vibrant and full. A sick, suffocating realization washed over me. I was not just a girlfriend. I was a project. I was Project Sarah. And Phase 2 could only mean one thing. My gaze drifted back to the display cases, and I saw it. On the very last mannequin head, which was still bare, there was a small, neatly typed label. It simply read, Project Sarah anticipated completion date 2 days from now. My blood ran cold. He had a date. He had a plan. And I was next. A faint click echoed from the study, followed by the soft creak of the hidden door. He was coming back. Panic, raw and visceral, clawed at my throat. I had to get out. I spun around, my eyes darting frantically for an escape. There was no window in this room. The only way out was back through the hidden passage, back into the study. I heard the soft, rhythmic footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate, growing louder. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it would burst through my chest. I scrambled toward the passage, my hands fumbling in the dark. Found something interesting. Did we? Sweetheart. Leo's voice purred from the doorway of the hidden room. No longer kind, no longer charming. It was cold, predatory, devoid of any warmth. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. He stood there, framed by the light from the study, his face a mask of chilling calm. His eyes, those eyes I once thought were kind, now held a terrifying, calculating glint. He was not smiling. I knew you were curious, he continued, his voice dangerously soft. Always so observant. It is one of the things I found so captivating about you. Sarah, that keen intellect, that drive to understand. He took a step into the room, his gaze sweeping over the wigs, the tools, the open journal. But some things are better left undisturbed. My mind raced, trying to find a way out, any way out. Leo, please. I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. What is all this? What are you doing? He chuckled, a low, humorless sound that sent shivers down my spine. What am I doing? I am pursuing my passion. Sarah, my art, my life's work. And you, my dear, are the most exquisite canvas I have ever encountered. He took another step, closing the distance between us. Your hair, it is truly a masterpiece. The color, the texture, the way it shines. It is simply divine, and it will be the centerpiece of my collection. He reached out a hand, not to grab me, but to gently, almost reverently, touch a strand of my hair. I flinched back, recoiling from his touch. His eyes narrowed slightly. No need to be afraid. Sarah, this is a privilege. Not many women get to be preserved in such a magnificent way. You will be immortalized. Immortalized. I choked out, tears stinging my eyes. You mean you are going to scalp me? The word hung in the air, a horrifying accusation. He frowned, a slight, almost pained expression. Such a crude term. I prefer meticulously harvested. It is a delicate process, of course. Requires precision, care. But the results are breathtaking. He gestured to the rows of wigs. See, each one a testament to beauty, preserved forever. He started walking slowly around the table, picking up a pair of the finer, sharper scissors. They gleamed wickedly under the fluorescent light. I have been planning this for weeks. Sarah, ever since our first date, your hair called to me. I knew, the moment I saw it, that it was meant to be mine. He turned to face me, the scissors held loosely in his hand. His eyes were wide, almost manic. You see, I do not just collect hair. Sarah, I cherish it. I give it a new life. A permanent home. I took a step back, then another, my eyes darting around the room, desperately searching for anything, a weapon, an escape route. My hand brushed against a heavy, antique paperweight on the table. Do not even think about it. Sarah, he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. He was no longer the charming, gentle Leo. This was a predator, calm and utterly ruthless. You are not going anywhere. Not until I am finished. He lunged. It was a blur of motion. I screamed, a raw, primal sound, and swung the paperweight with all my might. It connected with something, a sickening thud, and Leo grunted, stumbling back. The scissors clattered to the floor. He recovered quickly, his eyes blazing with fury. You little bitch, he snarled, all pretense of calm gone. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, digging his fingers into my flesh. I struggled, kicking and screaming, trying to break free. He dragged me towards the center of the room, towards one of the empty mannequin heads on the table. You will regret that. Sarah, he hissed, his face contorted in a mask of rage. You will regret trying to fight me. I managed to twist my body, pulling my arm free with a desperate surge of adrenaline. I saw my chance. The hidden passage. It was still open. I sprinted, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor. He was right behind me, his heavy footsteps thudding. I burst through the passage, into the study, and then into the hallway, screaming at the top of my lungs. Help! Someone. He is going to kill me. I did not know if anyone would hear. His house was isolated. I ran towards the front door, fumbling with the deadbolt. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely turn the lock. I heard him just behind me, breathing heavily. You are not getting away. Sarah, he roared, his voice echoing through the silent house. Just as I got the door unlocked, his hand clamped down on my shoulder, spinning me around. He shoved me against the wall, hard, knocking the wind out of me. My head hit the plaster with a sickening crack, and stars exploded behind my eyes. He pinned me there, his face inches from mine, his breath hot and rancid. You belong to me, he snarled, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. Your hair belongs to me. I saw his hand raise, saw the glint of something metallic. Not the scissors, but a small, sharp knife. He must have picked it up from the kitchen. Desperate, I kicked out, connecting with his shin. He cried out in pain, momentarily loosening his grip. It was just enough. With a surge of strength I did not know I had, I twisted away, tearing myself free. I yanked the front door open and stumbled out into the cool night air, gasping for breath. I did not look back. I just ran. Down the porch steps, across the lawn, and onto the street, my bare feet pounding on the pavement. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs ached, until I could not run anymore. I do not know how long I ran, or how far. Eventually, I collapsed on someone's lawn, sobbing uncontrollably, shaking from head to toe. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling, and called 911. The police arrived quickly. I was a hysterical mess, barely coherent, but I managed to tell them enough. They took me to the hospital for my head injury and shock, and then to the station to give a full statement. They seemed skeptical at first, but the urgency in my voice, the raw terror, must have convinced them. They went to Leo's house. I waited, huddled in a blanket, reliving every terrifying moment. Hours later, an officer came back to me, his face grim. They found it. The hidden room, the wigs, the tools, the journal with its meticulous plans for Project Sarah. They also found other things they did not elaborate on, but the look on the officer's face told me it was far worse than just hair. They found evidence of more than just collecting. They found evidence of abduction, of restraint, of things I could not even bring myself to imagine. Leo was apprehended without incident. He was calm, almost serene when they found him. He did not resist. He just kept asking if they had preserved the collection. He was charged with multiple counts, including kidnapping, assault, and attempted murder. The investigation uncovered a horrifying pattern spanning years, a string of missing women whose cases had gone cold. Their hair, meticulously documented and preserved, became the key evidence. It has been a year since that night. Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today's story is a pretty wild one, sent in by a listener named Alex. Now, Alex usually keeps to himself, pretty level-headed guy, not one for dramatics. But what he went through, well, let us just say it is the kind of thing that makes you want to lock your doors and sleep with the lights on. It is a story about dating in the modern world, about red flags you do not see until they are already tearing into you, and about the kind of horror that does not always come with a mask or a chainsaw. Sometimes it just looks like a perfectly normal person. So grab a snack, turn down the lights, and let us dive into Alex's experience. My name's Alex, and I am just your average guy, you know, late 20s, working a pretty standard office job, trying to navigate the whole dating scene. It is a jungle out there, especially after a pretty rough breakup a few months back. I was finally starting to feel like myself, again, ready to dip my toes back in. So, like any self-respecting millennial, I fired up the dating apps. Swiped left, swiped right, you know the drill. That is how I met Sarah. She seemed great, honestly. Her profile pictures were cute, not overly filtered. She had a good job, similar interests, and her bio was witty without trying too hard. We matched, exchanged a few messages, and the conversation flowed easily. It felt normal, refreshing, even. After a few days of back and forth, we decided to grab drinks. Our first date was at this cozy little bar downtown. Nothing fancy, just a good spot for a first meeting. Sarah showed up looking even better than her pictures. She had this really warm smile, bright eyes, and a laugh that was genuinely infectious. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. Work, hobbies, our terrible ex-as-usual first date stuff. There were no awkward silences, no weird vibes. She seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, and I felt the same way about her. I walked her to her car. We exchanged a quick, polite hug and made plans for a second date. I went home feeling pretty good about it. Optimistic, even. I got home, probably around midnight, maybe a little later. I was tired, but in a good mood. Kicked off my shoes, tossed my keys on the counter, and pretty much face planted into bed. I remember falling asleep almost instantly, a pleasant buzz of conversation and hopeful anticipation still lingering in my mind. The next morning, I woke up feeling off, not hungover, because I had not had that much to drink, but just heavy, like I had not really slept well. My muscles ached, which was weird because I had not hit the gym in a few days. I yawned, stretched, and as I ran a hand over my chest, I felt a sharp sting. I looked down. My first thought was, what the hell? Across my chest, just below my collarbone, there were three thin, parallel red lines, like scratches. They were not super deep, but definitely visible, and they stung when I touched them. I frowned, confused. Had I scratched myself in my sleep? It happens, I guess. Sometimes you wake up with a rogue nail mark on your face or something. But these were deliberate. Too straight, too evenly spaced. I sat up, pushing the covers back. That is when I saw more. On my left arm, a similar set of marks, slightly longer. On my right bicep, another two. And when I reached around to my back, my fingers brushed against several more, running down my shoulder blade. Some were just red marks. Others had actually broken the skin, little pinpricks of dried blood. I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror, turning this way and that. It looked like I would have been in a fight with a very small, very angry cat. But I do not own a cat, and I definitely had not been in a fight last night. The date with Sarah was perfectly pleasant. I would gone straight home, alone. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I would have been tossing and turning, caught my nails on something. But my nails were trimmed short. Maybe a loose spring in the mattress. I checked my bed, ran my hand over the sheets. Nothing sharp, no snags. My duvet was soft, my pillowcases smooth. There was nothing in my bed that could have caused these kinds of marks. A prickle of unease started to crawl up my spine. It was just weird. Too many scratches, too uniform. I showered, trying to scrub away the confusion, but the marks remained, a stark red reminder on my skin. As I went about my day, getting ready for work, the memory of the date with Sarah kept replaying in my mind. Had anything seemed off? Anything at all? No, it had been perfectly normal. She was charming, funny, a little shy even. Nothing about her suggested she was some kind of secret scratch monster. I pushed it out of my mind. It had to be some weird sleep thing. Maybe I was sleepwalking and scraped myself on a doorframe. Though I could not remember ever sleepwalking in my life. I decided to keep an eye on it, but not freak out. Yet, the next few days were normal. The scratches started to fade, turning a dull pink. Sarah and I texted a bit, nothing out of the ordinary. She seemed eager for our second date, and so was I, despite the weird scratch incident. I told myself it was just a fluke, a one-off. Our second date was a movie and then dinner. Again, everything went smoothly. We laughed, we talked. We even held hands during the movie, which felt sweet and natural. At the end of the night, we shared a slightly longer kiss goodnight on my doorstep. It was nice. I walked inside, feeling that same pleasant buzz as before. A good date. A good night. I went to bed, feeling pretty confident this time. No weird sleep incidents tonight. I thought I was relaxed, happy. I was wrong. I woke up the next morning, and the moment my eyes opened, I felt it. A dull ache, deeper than before, and a burning sensation across my skin. My stomach dropped. I knew, even before I looked. I stumbled out of bed and into the bathroom, flipping on the light. The sight in the mirror made my blood run cold. It was worse. So much worse. My chest was a crisscross of angry red lines, some of them deep enough to be weeping a little clear fluid. My arms looked like a roadmap of violence. My back, when I twisted to see it, was a canvas of fresh, jagged marks, some of them overlapping the fading ones from a few nights ago. It looked like someone had taken a rake to me. Panic started to set in. This was not normal. This was not a sleepwalking incident. This was not a loose spring. This was deliberate. And it only happened after I had been with Sarah. My mind immediately jumped to the most obvious, terrifying conclusion: Sarah. But how? We had not been physically intimate. We had not even been in a situation where she could have done this to me without me noticing. She did not have long, sharp nails. I remembered her hands during the movie, her fingers intertwined with mine. They were soft, well kept. No talons. I called my best friend, Mark, his number a blur through my frantic thoughts. He answered, groggy. "Dude, you gotta help me." I blurted out, my voice tight with fear. "Whoa. Alex, what is up? You sound like you just saw a ghost." Worse. I woke up with scratches all over my body. Again. Like, really bad this time. And it only happens after I've been with Sarah. Mark was silent for a moment. Scratches. Like from a cat. No, dude. Like claw marks. But I do not have a cat. I do not even have anything sharp in my bed. I am telling you, it is not normal. He sounded skeptical, but also concerned. Okay. Calm down. Did you get drunk and fall somewhere? Or maybe you are having some really intense dreams. No, I am telling you. I went to bed feeling fine. And then I wake up like this. It is like someone's attacking me in my sleep. Mark suggested I set up a small camera in my room, just a cheap webcam pointed at my bed, to see if I was doing it to myself. He also suggested I talk to Sarah, see if she had any weird sleep habits, or if anything strange was happening to her. I told him I would try the camera, but talking to Sarah about it felt like a surefire way to scare her off. Or, if she was somehow involved, to alert her. I bought a cheap security camera that afternoon and set it up discreetly on my bookshelf, pointing directly at my bed. I was determined to get to the bottom of this. That night, I was a nervous wreck. I barely slept, my eyes darting open at every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside. I felt an intense, almost suffocating pressure in the room, like the air itself was thick with something unseen. I kept the lights on, but even then, shadows seemed to dance in my peripheral vision. When morning came, I felt utterly drained, but relieved. No new scratches. I immediately checked the camera footage. It was mostly just me tossing and turning restlessly. But then, around 3:17 a.m., something happened. The camera's night vision mode picked up my sleeping form. But then, for a split second, the image seemed to warp. A flicker like interference. And in that same instant, a shadowy, almost translucent form seemed to pass over my bed, obscuring me for a moment. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. A glitch. A dust particle catching the infrared. My mind screamed no. It looked like a ripple in the air, a distortion that moved with purpose. I rewound it, played it again, frame by agonizing frame. It was faint, almost imperceptible. But it was there, a dark, indistinct mass, like a cloud of smoke, hovering over me. And then, just as it vanished, I could almost make out a faint, almost invisible shiver in the air above my chest, just where the worst of the scratches usually appeared. I felt a cold dread settle deep in my stomach. This was not a glitch. This was not me. I did not get any new scratches that night, which was a relief, but the exhaustion was profound. It felt like someone had literally sucked the energy out of me. I spent the next few days trying to avoid contact with Sarah. I made excuses, said I was busy with work, had a family thing. She seemed understanding, but her texts started to get a little persistent. Everything okay? Miss you. Let me know when you are free. They were normal texts, but knowing what I now suspected, they felt like a predator circling its prey. I started doing some research online. Waking up with scratches, sleep attacks, paranormal activity in sleep. The results were a rabbit hole of folklore, urban legends, and terrifying personal accounts. Demonic attacks, succubi, incubi, shadow people. Most of it sounded like the ramblings of paranoid individuals, but some of the stories they hit too close to home. The descriptions of waking up drained, of feeling a presence, of inexplicable marks on the body. One forum post, in particular, caught my eye. It talked about a type of entity, often referred to as a sleep feeder or energy vampire, that does not just feed on fear, but on a person's life force itself. It often attaches to an unsuspecting host, someone who might be emotionally vulnerable or have a specific lineage, and uses their proximity to access and feed on others. The scratches, the posts explained, were often a way for the entity to mark its victim, to establish a stronger connection, or even to cause physical pain as a form of feeding. The more frightened the victim, the more potent the energy. This sent a shiver down my spine. A host. Sarah, could she be unknowingly carrying something? Or worse, was she aware? I tried to push the thought away. Sarah was sweet, kind. She could not be involved in something so sinister. But the evidence, circumstantial as it was, kept piling up. The scratches only happened after I saw her. The camera footage, the profound exhaustion. I decided to test my theory. I would go a full week without any contact with Sarah. No texts, no calls, no seeing her. If the scratches stopped, I would have my answer. It was a tough week. I felt guilty, like I was ghosting her, but the fear was stronger than my guilt, and true to my hypothesis. That week passed without a single new scratch. I still felt a lingering tiredness, a sense of being watched, but the physical attacks had ceased. A wave of relief washed over me, but was quickly replaced by a cold, hard dread. It was not a coincidence. Sarah was connected to this. I knew I needed to break things off, definitively, but I could not just tell her, "Hey, I think you are a human conduit for a demonic energy vampire that scratches me in my sleep." She would think I was insane. So I drafted a text, something vague about not feeling a connection, needing space, the usual dating app breakup boilerplate. I typed out, hover my thumb over the send button, my heart pounding. Before I could send it, my phone rang. It was Sarah. I hesitated, then answered. Maybe this was my chance to just get it over with. To tell her directly, "Hey, Alex. So glad you picked up," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. "I was just thinking about you. I had the weirdest dream last night." My blood ran cold. A dream. I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, it was so vivid. I dreamt I was in your room, and you were sleeping, and there was this shadow, just hovering over you, and I felt this really intense hunger. And then I woke up feeling so refreshed, like I would have the best sleep of my life." She giggled. Crazy, right? I could not speak. The hunger, the shadow, her feeling refreshed while I had been so utterly drained. It was all clicking into place with a terrifying, sickening precision. She was not just a conduit. She was feeding too. Maybe not consciously, maybe not actively, but she was benefiting from whatever was happening to me. "Alex, are you there?" she asked, her voice losing a hint of its earlier cheerfulness, a subtle edge creeping in. Yeah, I am here." "Sarah," I managed to stammer out. My mind was racing. I had to end this. "Now, you sound a little off," she said, her voice now flat. "Did you have a bad dream too?" No. I am actually really busy right now." "Sarah, I was just about to send you a text. I do not think this is going to work out." I forced the words out, trying to sound firm, but my voice was shaking. There was a beat of silence on the other end. A long, chilling silence. Then she spoke. Her voice was no longer sweet or cheerful. It was low, guttural, almost a hiss. "Oh, Alex, that is a shame. I was just starting to get comfortable. And then I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound coming through the phone, like nails on a chalkboard, but sharper, more deliberate. It was faint, but it was there, and it sent a jolt of pure terror through me. I hung up, my hand trembling so violently I almost dropped the phone. I blocked her number immediately. Then I blocked her on every social media platform I could think of. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a desperate need to put as much distance between us as possible. But the night was not over. I could not sleep. I paced my apartment, heart hammering against my ribs. Every shadow seemed to stretch. Every creak of the old building sounded like footsteps. I felt the pressure again, heavier this time, like an invisible weight pressing down on the air around me. I kept the lights on, the TV blaring. Anything to drown out the silence and the growing sense of dread. Around 2 a.m., I was sitting on my couch, huddled under a blanket, when I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible tap, tap, tap at my window. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. I froze. I slowly, cautiously, walked over the window, my eyes fixed on the blinds. The tapping stopped. I peered through a tiny gap in the slats. Nothing, just the dark, empty street below. My building had a fire escape, but it was on the other side. There was no way anyone could be tapping on my window. I backed away, my breath catching in my throat. I told myself it was just the wind, a branch hitting the glass. But I knew it was not. I went to bed, not to sleep, but just to lie there, wrapped in my blanket, staring at the ceiling. I was exhausted, but fear kept me wide awake. I must have drifted off eventually, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up with a gasp, my body rigid with terror. The room was pitch black. The TV was off. The lights were off. I distinctly remembered leaving them on. And I felt it. The weight. The pressure. It was all around me, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I could not move. My muscles were locked, my eyes darting wildly in the darkness. Sleep paralysis. This was it. A shadowy form began to coalesce at the foot of my bed. Taller than a person, gaunt with long, impossibly thin limbs. Its head was indistinct, just a darker void in the darkness. But I felt its eyes on me, a cold, piercing gaze that seemed to strip me bare. Then, I felt the pain. Sharp, searing lines appearing across my skin. I could feel them forming, tearing, even though I could not move to defend myself. It was like phantom claws raking across my chest, my arms, my face. I could almost hear a faint, ragged breathing, a whisper that was not quite words, but pure, malevolent intent. The fear was so intense it was physical, a burning ice in my veins. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to thrash, to fight, but I was utterly paralyzed. I could only lie there helpless, as the unseen entity continued its assault. I felt it draining me, not just my energy, but my very essence, leaving me hollow and cold. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The pressure lifted. The shadow dissipated. I could move again. I shot upright in bed, gasping for air, my whole body trembling. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy, and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating my room. My heart stopped. The scratches were everywhere. Not just on me. My bed sheets were torn in places, thin rips in the fabric. My wooden headboard had faint, parallel gouges in it. And on the wall next to my bed, just at head height, were 3 distinct, deep claw marks, scored into the paint and drywall, as if something with immense strength had raked its talons across it. I frantically shone the light on my own body. It was a mess. Deeper, angrier gashes than ever before. Some were bleeding freely, staining my shirt. My face felt raw, and when I touched it, I felt the raised welts of new marks. I knew then that I could not stay. Not another night. That morning, I called Mark again, my voice hoarse, my body still shaking. I told him everything. The phone call with Sarah, the scratches on the wall, the sleep paralysis, the shadow. He listened, silent and grim. He did not offer skepticism this time. He just said, "Alex, get out of there. Come stay with me." I packed a bag, throwing essentials into it with frantic speed. I did not even care about leaving things behind. I just needed to leave. As I was about to walk out the door, I took one last look at my apartment. The scratches on the wall glared back at me, a horrifying signature. And then I noticed something else. On my small wooden coffee table, in the center of the living room, was a single, perfect, long black hair. It was not mine. My hair is brown. It was thick, glossy, and impossibly long. I knew whose it was. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and did not look back. I moved out of that apartment a week later, breaking my lease and taking a significant financial hit. It did not matter. I could not have stayed there. I moved to a different part of the city, got a new phone number, and completely cut ties with anyone who might have connected me to Sarah. I never saw her again, never heard from her, but the experience had changed me. I am still single. Dating apps. Forget about it. The thought of letting someone new into my life, into my space, sends a cold dread through me. I still check my body every morning, a ritual born of fear. I still sleep with a nightlight on, and I check my windows and doors multiple times before bed. Every faint shadow, every creak, every unexplained sound sends my heart racing. I do not know what Sarah was. I do not know if she was a willing participant, a knowing host, or just an unfortunate conduit for something ancient and malevolent. All I know is that I came too close to something that want to consume me, piece by piece, scratch by agonizing scratch. And that is why, folks, you gotta be careful out there. Sometimes the red flags are not obvious. Sometimes they are hidden behind a pretty smile and a charming personality. And sometimes, by the time you see them, they have already dug their claws in. Sleep tight, everyone. And do not let anything scratch you in the night. All right, let me tell you something. When I last left you, I was a wreck. A complete, shattered mess of a human being, running on pure adrenaline and the kind of terror that makes your teeth ache. I would just fled my apartment, leaving behind the claw marks on my wall, the strange black hair on my coffee table, and the chilling, undeniable proof that Sarah, my seemingly perfect Tinder date, was something else. Something monstrous. I still do not know what Sarah was: a demon, a parasite, a living shadow, or just a deeply disturbed individual with supernatural abilities. All I knew was that she had drained me, attacked me, and left me with scars that were not just skin deep. That night, after tearing out of my building like a madman, I drove. I did not have a destination, just an overwhelming need to put as much distance between myself and that apartment, that city, her, as humanly possible. My hands were shaking so bad, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles were white, and my vision blurred from unshed tears and pure exhaustion. Every shadow seemed to stretch and writhe. Every reflection in the rearview mirror made me flinch, expecting to see that gaunt, shadowy figure looming behind me. I ended up pulling into a cheap motel parking lot about 200 miles away, just as the first sliver of sickly gray dawn began to paint the horizon. The kind of place with flickering neon signs and a faint smell of stale cigarettes and desperation. I paid cash, using a 20 I found crumpled in my wallet, and practically sprinted to my room. The first thing I did was check the locks. All of them. Even the flimsy chain lock felt like a pathetic defense against whatever I was up against. Then, I turned on every single light in the room, flooding the space with harsh yellow light. I did not care about the electricity bill. I just could not bear the thought of a single dark corner. I collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, my heart still hammering against my ribs. My body ached. Not just a deep, burning pain from the gashes on my chest and arm, which, by the way, I still had not properly looked at, but a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. It felt like every ounce of my life force had been sucked dry. I closed my eyes, but sleep was a terrifying prospect. I knew what waited for me there: the sleep paralysis, the shadow, the scratching. So I just lay there, staring at the popcorn ceiling, listening to the muffled sound of traffic outside and the unsettling hum of the air conditioner. My mind replayed everything: Sarah's charming smile, her infectious laugh, the way she seemed to understand me, and then the scratches, the growing dread, the camera footage, her guttural voice on the phone, the thing that attacked me. It was all a blur of horrifying images, swirling together into an incomprehensible nightmare. I knew I could not go to the police. What would I say? Officer, my Tinder date is a supernatural entity that sucked my energy and left claw marks on my wall. They would lock me up in a psychiatric ward. And frankly, I was starting to wonder if they would be right to do so. I felt like I was losing my mind. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and self-preservation. I barely slept, maybe an hour or two at a time, always with the lights on, always fighting the creeping dread that something was watching me. I ate whatever junk food I could grab from a gas station, my appetite non-existent. I showered, carefully avoiding looking at my reflection for too long, terrified of what I might see. The gashes on my body were real, though deep, angry red lines, some still oozing a little, others already scabbing over in an unnatural, quick way. They looked like something a wild animal would inflict, not a person. I bought a cheap burner phone and a new SIM card, just in case Sarah, or whatever was connected to her, could track my old one. I called my boss, mumbled something about a family emergency, and took indefinite leave. My life as I knew it was over. I was a fugitive from an unknown horror, and I had no idea how to fight it, or even if it could be fought. One afternoon, probably the third or fourth day after I fled, I was holed up in my motel room, trying to distract myself. I would gone through every channel on the cheap TV, settling on a local news broadcast. Anything to keep my mind from spiraling into the abyss of fear. The reporter was droning on about city council meetings, a new park initiative, and then the segment shifted. A solemn-faced anchor appeared on screen. And now, a missing persons report, she said, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. My heart gave a painful lurch. I was not sure why, but a wave of cold dread washed over me. I would seen these reports countless times before, but this time, something felt different, like the universe was about to play a cruel joke. Then, the image appeared on screen. A photograph displayed prominently next to the anchor's head, and my blood ran cold. It was Sarah. Her face, smiling, vibrant, the same picture she would use on her Tinder profile. Below it, in bold white letters, were the words missing Sarah Jenkins. My jaw went slack. The remote slipped from my numb fingers, clattering to the floor. The sound was deafening in the sudden, absolute silence of my room. Sarah, missing. No, this could not be right. Sarah was the monster. Sarah was the one who had attacked me, who had drained me, who had left me scarred and terrified. Sarah was the one I was running from. The reporter continued, her voice a distant buzz in my ears as my world tilted on its axis. Sarah Jenkins, 28, was last seen leaving her apartment complex in the downtown area on date, which was just a few days ago, shortly after our last encounter. Friends and family are concerned for her safety, as she has not been seen or heard from since. Police are asking anyone with information regarding MS Jenkins' whereabouts to please contact the tip line. I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. The picture of her, so innocent, so normal, plastered on a missing persons flyer. It was like a sick, twisted joke. Was this some kind of elaborate deception? Was she trying to lure me out, to make me feel guilty? But the reporter's tone, the solemnity of the broadcast, it felt real, too real. A new kind of terror began to creep in, cold and insidious. If Sarah was missing, then what the hell had happened to her? And what did that mean for me? A dozen horrifying possibilities flashed through my mind. First, the most obvious: she was not a monster. She was just a very disturbed person who had attacked me. And then something else had happened to her. Maybe she would have had a breakdown. Maybe someone else had found her. Maybe someone she had done this to before. Second, and far more chilling, she was a monster, or at least connected to it. But maybe she was not the source. Maybe she was a victim too. A host. A conduit. And if she was missing, what did that mean for the thing that had been using her? Was it still out there? And had I, by interacting with her, by being marked by her, become its next target? The guilt hit me then, a sickening punch to the gut. I had blocked her. I had hung up on her. I had fled. Had I abandoned her to whatever fate had befallen her? Had she been trying to warn me in that guttural, distorted voice before something took her? The refreshed feeling she described, the shadow over me in her dream, was she experiencing the same thing I was, but from a different perspective? Was she drained too, but then used to drain me? My head spun. The lines between victim and perpetrator, monster and human, blurred into an indistinguishable mess. I felt a sudden, irrational urge to go back. To go back to my apartment, to Sarah's apartment, to find answers. But the fear, the primal, gut-wrenching fear, kept me rooted to the spot. What if going back meant walking right into a trap? What if the thing that took Sarah was still there, waiting for me? I spent the rest of the day in a haze, my eyes glued to the TV, hoping for an update, any scrap of information. Nothing, just her smiling face, forever etched into my memory, now accompanied by the chilling word missing. I knew I could not just sit there. I had to do something. I had to understand. Using my new burner phone, I started a cautious, anonymous search. I typed Sarah Jenkins missing into the search engine. The local news articles popped up, identical to the broadcast. They gave a brief description of her work as a freelance graphic designer, her passion for art. Nothing about strange scratches, nothing about guttural voices, nothing about shadowy entities. Just a normal, vibrant young woman who had vanished without a trace. I dug deeper. I found her social media profiles. YouTube, Instagram. They were still active, a digital ghost of her former life. Pictures of her with friends, at art exhibits, laughing, living. It felt surreal, looking at these images, knowing what I knew or thought I knew. I scrolled through her posts, searching for any hint, any clue. Was there a change in her behavior? A cryptic message? Anything that suggested she was in trouble or that she was different? There was one post from about 2 weeks before our first date. A selfie. She looked a little tired, a little drawn, but still beautiful. The caption read, "Feeling a bit off lately, like I am running on empty. Guess I need a vacation." Running on empty, just like I felt after our dates. Just like she said she felt refreshed after seeing the shadow over me. A cold dread seeped into my bones. What if she was a victim, just like me, but she had been a victim for longer? What if whatever was draining her was also compelling her to drain others? A parasitic chain, with her as the unwilling link. I kept searching, expanding my queries. Missing persons, my city, unexplained disappearances. I found a few other cases, mostly older, but one particular case caught my eye. A young man, early 20s, had gone missing about 6 months ago. His name was Mark. His flyer was similar to Sarah's, a friendly, smiling face. The article mentioned he was last seen after a first date. The date was with an unidentified woman. My blood ran cold again. Unidentified woman. Could it have been Sarah? Was this a pattern? I looked for any connection. Did Mark have strange scratches? Did his family report him acting strangely before he vanished? Of course not. The police reports would not mention that. But the coincidence gnawed at me. I needed more. I needed to see her apartment. The next morning, driven by a desperate need for answers and a morbid curiosity, I drove back to the city. I parked several blocks away from her address, just outside the perimeter of what I thought might be a police presence. I walked the rest of the way, my hood pulled low, my heart pounding with every step. Every person I passed felt like a potential threat, a potential witness. Her apartment complex was a modern glass and steel building. I remembered it from when I dropped her off. I stood across the street, pretending to be absorbed in my phone, but my eyes were scanning everything. There were no flashing lights, no crime scene tape, no obvious signs of a police investigation. Just a quiet, ordinary apartment building. I saw a woman walking her dog, a young man with headphones, a couple arguing softly on a balcony. No one seemed to be paying any special attention. It was unnerving. If Sarah was missing, would not there be more activity? I lingered for a long time, trying to absorb every detail. I watched the entrance, the windows. Nothing, just a normal day in a normal city. But I knew, with every fiber of my being, that something deeply abnormal had happened here. As the sun began to dip, casting long, eerie shadows, I felt a familiar chill creep up my spine. The air grew heavy, almost oppressive. I shivered, though it was not particularly cold. It was a feeling, the feeling of being watched. The same feeling I would had in my own apartment just before the sleep paralysis hit. I looked around frantically. Was it here? Was the entity here, waiting? Did it follow me? Or was it just a residual presence, lingering in the place where it had last manifested? My eyes landed on a dark alleyway next to the building, a narrow gap between her complex and an old brick warehouse. It was almost completely swallowed by shadow, even in the fading daylight. And for a fleeting moment, just as a gust of wind rustled some discarded newspapers, I thought I saw it, a ripple in the darkness, a shape that was not quite there, a deeper shade of black against the already encroaching night. My breath caught in my throat. My legs felt like lead, but my instinct screamed at me to run. I turned and walked away, trying not to break into a full sprint, trying to appear nonchalant, but my heart was a frantic drum solo in my chest. I did not look back. I could not. I just kept walking until I was back in my car. Then I practically dove inside, fumbled with the keys, starting the engine, and speeding away. I drove back to my motel, my mind racing. The missing persons flyer, the running on empty post, Mark, the shadow in the alley. It all coalesced into a terrifying, incomplete picture. Sarah was not just a monster. She was a victim, a host, and I, Alex, had become connected to whatever parasitic entity was doing this. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay awake, the motel room lights blazing, the TV softly murmuring. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, sent jolts of pure fear through me. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, a prisoner of my own mind in the terrifying reality I would stumbled into. Around 3 a.m., the familiar dread began. My body stiffened. My eyelids felt impossibly heavy. I fought it. I really did, clawing at my own consciousness, trying to stay awake. But it was like fighting against an invisible, overwhelming force. The room began to blur, the edges of my vision darkening. And then, I was paralyzed. I could not move. I could not scream. My body was a leaden weight, pinned to the bed. The air grew impossibly cold, and a sickening pressure settled on my chest, making it impossible to draw a full breath. The shadow appeared in the corner of the room, taller, darker, more defined than I had ever seen it. It was not just a fleeting form anymore. It was gaunt, skeletal, with long, spindly limbs that seemed to stretch and contort in impossible ways. Its head was indistinct, a deeper void in the darkness, but I felt its gaze, a cold, predatory intelligence focused entirely on me. It began to glide towards me, not walking, but flowing across the floor like smoke. My eyes were wide open, locked on its horrifying form. tears streaming down my temples. I tried to scream, to move, to do anything, but my body was unresponsive, a useless shell. As it drew closer, I started to hear it. The faint, horrifying sound of scratching. Not just the sound I would heard on the phone, or the marks on my wall. This was deeper, more visceral. Like fingernails dragging across bone, or something sharp tearing through flesh. The sound seemed to emanate from the shadow itself, a constant, low, grating noise that vibrated in my very core. Then, to my horror, I saw something else within the shadow. A flicker of form, barely visible, like a ghostly image trapped within the darkness. It was a face, a familiar face, contorted in agony, eyes wide with silent scream. Sarah, her face, pale and translucent, was trapped within the entity's form, like a fly in amber. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. Her eyes, though filled with terror, seemed to look at me with a desperate plea, a warning. She was a part of it, yet separate, a prisoner. The shadow reached the side of my bed, its long, skeletal arm extended, its fingers like razor-sharp talons. I could feel the cold radiating from it, a physical chill that pierced my skin straight to my bones. It hovered over my chest, right where the deepest gashes were. And then, I felt it, not the physical pain of claws, but a profound, sickening emptiness, like a plug had been pulled from my soul. A drain. It was sucking something out of me, something vital, something that made me me. I felt myself fading, my consciousness flickering like a dying flame. Sarah's face, trapped within the shadow, seemed to twist even further in despair. Her eyes in that moment met mine, and I understood. She was not the monster. She was its latest victim, its latest vessel. And now it was coming for me. It was not just draining me, it was trying to absorb me, just as it had absorbed her. The scratching sound intensified, a cacophony of scraping and tearing, and I realized it was not just the sound of its movement. It was the sound of it tearing away at my very essence, pulling me apart from the inside out. Just as I felt my last shred of self slipping away, a sudden, blinding flash of white light erupted from the TV screen. The static, would have been a low hum, suddenly roared, a deafening hiss that filled the room. The shadow recoiled hissing, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It pulled back from me, its form wavering. Sarah's face momentarily clearer in its agony, before being swallowed back into the darkness. The pressure on my chest eased. My body twitched. The paralysis began to recede, slowly, agonizingly. The shadow, still hissing, began to retreat, flowing back towards the corner of the room, its form shrinking, becoming indistinct again. As it vanished into the oppressive darkness of the corner, the TV static settled back into a low murmur, the light dimming. I gasped, a ragged, choking sound, as full movement returned to my limbs. I sat bolt upright, drenched in sweat, my body trembling uncontrollably. My chest burned, not from physical pain, but from the profound sense of violation, of being emptied. I stared at the corner where it had been, where Sarah's ghostly face had appeared. It was empty now, just a dark patch of wall. I was alive, but I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I was not safe. The missing persons flyer for Sarah was not a trick. It was a chilling confirmation. She was not the hunter. She was the hunted, just like me. And whatever had taken her, whatever had used her, was now fully aware of me. It had tasted me, marked me, and it wanted more. It wanted to consume me entirely. I could not go to the police. I could not go to my family. Who would believe me? I was a man on the run, a potential suspect in a missing persons case, with a story that sounded like the ramblings of a madman. I was alone, and I knew, as I sat there, shivering in the harsh motel light, that this was not over. This was just the beginning. The shadow was still out there, lurking in the dark corners of the world, and I was now on its radar. I was marked, and it would come for me again. It was not just my energy it wanted anymore. It wanted to drag me into the darkness, to make me its next host, its next prisoner, just like Sarah. And the scratching sound it still echoed in my ears, a constant reminder of the unseen horror that had touched my life and would never let me go. I am still running. I am still looking over my shoulder, because I know deep down that it is out there, and it is only a matter of time before it finds me again. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, I have got another story for you, one that is, well, it is still happening if I am being honest. It is a continuation of the last time I spoke to you about Sarah and the thing that took her. I am still running, still looking over my shoulder, but the world keeps turning, and sometimes you just crave something normal, something human, even when you know it is a trap. When I last left you, I was a shattered mess, a fugitive in my own life. The encounter with that gaunt shadow, the one with Sarah's face trapped inside it, had marked me. I was a ghost, drifting from town to town, cheap motel to cheap apartment, always with that chilling presence just at the edge of my senses. The scratching sound, like fingernails on a chalkboard but somehow deeper, more insidious, was my constant companion. It was not just in my head anymore sometimes. I swore I could hear it echoing from the walls, from beneath the floorboards, even from the empty space behind my closet door. I tried to disappear. I changed my phone number, deleted all my social media, paid for everything in cash. I picked a city far from where it all began, a place big enough to get lost in, but small enough that people still looked each other in the eye. My new apartment was on the third floor of an old building, tucked away on a quiet street. It had one bedroom, a small living room, a cramped kitchen, and a bathroom. Nothing fancy, nothing to draw attention. I thought maybe if I kept my head down, if I made myself small enough, it would pass me over. They would hunt for Sarah or for a new victim and forget my way. But it never forgot. My nights were a hellish cycle of exhaustion and terror. I would try to sleep, only to be jolted awake by a phantom touch, a cold spot in the room, or the sudden, deafening crescendo of that scratching sound. I would spend hours staring at the ceiling, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, convinced that any moment, the shadow would materialize in the corner of my room, its abyssal hunger radiating outwards. I would set up tripwires of empty cans, just to give me an auditory warning. But the entity moved like a whisper, like a thought. It did not make a sound until it wanted to. The loneliness was crushing. Imagine being hunted by something utterly inhuman, something that stole a person you barely knew but whose agony you now carry, and having absolutely no one to tell. No one would believe me. They would lock me up, or worse. They would just dismiss me as a paranoid lunatic. Every time I saw a news report about a missing person, a shiver would run down my spine. Was it the same thing? Was it still out there, gathering new hosts, new faces for its horrifying collection? After a few weeks of this self-imposed isolation, something in me started to fray. I was so tired of being alone, so tired of the constant vigilance. I craved a normal conversation, a laugh, even just the simple presence of another human being. It was a stupid, dangerous craving. I know that now, but at the time, it felt like the only thing that could anchor me to reality, to remind me that I was still a person, not just prey. So, against every fiber of my being, against every warning bell screaming in my head, I reactivated a burner phone and downloaded a dating app, Tinder, the very app that had introduced me to Sarah. I told myself it was different this time. I would be careful. I would meet in public, keep things light, and under no circumstances would I bring anyone back to my apartment. My apartment, my sanctuary, my fragile barrier against the darkness. I matched with a woman named Chloe. She had a friendly smile, kind eyes, and a profile that talked about hiking and a love for old movies. She seemed normal, refreshingly normal. We chatted for a few days, and it was a strange relief to talk about mundane things, what shows we were watching, our favorite hiking trails, the best coffee shops in the city, for a few brief moments. I almost forgot about the shadow, about Sarah, about the scratching. Almost. We set up a first date at a local pub. She was exactly as she appeared in her photos, maybe even prettier in person. We talked for hours, and I found myself genuinely enjoying her company. She was witty, engaging, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. I carefully crafted my answers, omitting anything about my past, about the real reason I would move to this city. I stuck to vague generalities, made up a backstory about a demanding old job and needing a change of pace. She seemed to buy it, or at least, she did not question it. When the date ended, I felt a lightness I had not experienced in months. A glimmer of hope, a tiny flicker in the vast darkness that had become my life. Maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to live again, to build something new, even with the shadow lurking. We went on a second date, then a third. Each time, I felt a little more comfortable, a little more human. Chloe was easy to be around. She had a way of making me laugh, of drawing me out my shell. I started to think, maybe this was it. Maybe I could outrun it after all. Maybe I could build a new life, a safe one. Then came the fourth date. And that is when things got weird. She would suggested we cook dinner at my place. I hesitated. My apartment was off limits. It was the one place I felt even a semblance of control, a place I would meticulously check for any signs of entity. But I also did not want to seem paranoid or unwelcoming. I would have been so careful not to let on how truly messed up my life was. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. I told myself it would be fine. I would just have to be extra vigilant. She arrived with a bottle of wine and a bag full of groceries, her smile as warm as ever. We put on some music, started chopping vegetables, and the evening felt domestic, normal. For a while, I even managed to relax. It started subtly. We were talking about apartment hunting, how hard it was to find a good place in this city. I mentioned, offhand, that my place was a bit small but cozy. Chloe paused, a knife in her hand, halfway through slicing a bell pepper. She looked around my tiny kitchen, then towards the living room. So, she began, her tone casual, almost conversational. What is your apartment like, layout-wise? Is it open concept or more traditional with separate rooms? I shrugged, a little uncomfortable, but trying to play it cool. Oh, it is pretty traditional. I guess. Small living room, then a little hall to the bedroom and bathroom. She nodded, but her eyes seemed to be tracing lines in the air, mapping out the space. Interesting. So, the bedroom is at the back, away from the front door. Yeah, pretty much. I said, trying to steer the conversation back to the food. Want another glass of wine? Sure, thanks, she said, taking the glass I offered. But her gaze lingered. And the bathroom, is that off the same hall? Or is it closer to the living room? Now, a tiny alarm bell started to ring in my head. It was an odd question, a bit too specific for casual conversation. But I told myself it was just her being curious, maybe a bit of a spatial thinker. It is off the hall, next to the bedroom. I replied, forcing a smile. She hummed thoughtfully. And do you have a basement? Or an attic? That is when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My building was old, and I would heard the landlord mention a shared basement laundry room, but it was not something I would ever brought up. And an attic, how would she even know to ask that? I think there is a shared basement for laundry. I said, my voice a little tighter than I intended. No attic access for my unit, though. Chloe just smiled, a perfectly normal, pleasant smile. Oh, okay. Just curious. I am a bit of a spatial person. I like to visualize spaces. She went back to chopping her pepper, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. But for me, the brief respite from paranoia was over. The scratching sound, which had been dormant for a few days, suddenly erupted in my mind, a furious, clawing sensation behind my ears. It was not loud, not yet, but it was there, a chilling reminder. I felt a cold dread creeping up my spine, a feeling eerily similar to the one I would felt near Sarah's apartment, that sense of being watched, of something else being present. I tried to shake it off. Maybe she was just quirky. Maybe my paranoia was making me overthink everything. But the questions had been so precise, so focused on the internal geography of my apartment. It felt less like casual curiosity and more like an interrogation. The rest of the evening fell off. Every time Chloe moved, every time her eyes swept across a part of my apartment, I felt a jolt of unease. I kept glancing at the shadows in the corners of the room, half expecting to see the gaunt outline of the entity. I jumped when the refrigerator hummed, convinced it was the scratching. When she finally left, I felt a wave of relief so intense it almost made me weak in the knees. I locked the door, bolted it, and then stood there, leaning against it, listening. The scratching was faint now, but it was definitely there, a low, persistent rasping that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I spent the night pacing, checking every window, every closet. I could not sleep. The image of Chloe, smiling innocently while asking about the exact location of my bedroom, kept replaying in my mind. Was she connected to it? Was she a victim, like Sarah? Or worse, was she an accomplice? A scout? The next day, she texted me, bright and cheerful, asking if I want to go hiking that weekend. My first instinct was to say no, to cut all ties, to run again. But a part of me, the part that craved answers, the part that was desperate to understand, made me hesitate. What if she knew something? What if she was a key to understanding what this thing was, and how to fight it? I agreed to meet her for coffee. I told myself I would be careful. I would press her subtly about her strange questions. When we met, she was her usual charming self. We talked about the hike, about the weather. Then, I decided to take the plunge. Hey, so I began trying to sound casual. I was just thinking about the other night. You asked a lot of really specific questions about my apartment layout. What was that all about? Chloe blinked, a faint flush rising on her cheeks. She laughed, a light, airy sound that did not quite reach her eyes. Oh, that. I told you, I am just a spatial person. I like to visualize things. It helps me feel connected. You know, like I am really in a space, even if I am just hearing about it. Her explanation fell hollow. Too rehearsed. Too neat. It just seemed a little intense. I pressed, watching her carefully. You asked about the bedroom, the bathroom, the basement. It was almost like you were drawing a map in your head. Her smile tightened. Her eyes, which had seemed so kind, now held a strange, almost vacant quality. Well, I guess I just have a good memory for details, she said, her voice a little colder now. Is there a problem with that? A profound sense of wrongness washed over me. The air around her suddenly felt heavy, charged with invisible energy. The scratching sound intensified in my head, a frantic, desperate clawing. It felt like a warning, a scream from the depths of my own mind. I decided to push harder. No problem, just curious. I lied. It just reminded me of something unsettling that happened to me recently. Someone I knew. They were obsessed with knowing the layout of places. And then, well, they disappeared. Chloe's face went utterly blank. Her eyes, usually so expressive, became like dark, empty pools. For a split second, I saw something flicker within them, something ancient and cold, something that was not Chloe at all. It was like looking into an abyss. Then, just as quickly, the mask was back. Her smile returned, a little too wide, a little too fixed. Oh, really? How awful, she said, but there was no empathy in her voice, only a detached curiosity. What kind of places were they interested in? I felt a cold dread spread through me, chilling me to the bone. This was not Chloe. Not entirely. Or maybe she was being used just like Sarah. The entity, the shadow, it was not just a monster that appeared in the dark. It was a predator that could manipulate, that could use human proxies, that could learn. It had used Chloe to gather information, to create a map of my new hiding place. I stood up abruptly, knocking my chair back. Look, I have to go. I stammered, my heart hammering. Something just came up. I am really sorry. Chloe watched me, her smile unwavering, those empty eyes following my every move. Oh, that is a shame, she said, her voice still light, but with an underlying current of something sinister. I was just starting to feel connected to your space. I did not wait for another word. I practically ran out of the coffee shop, the scratching sound now a frantic, deafening roar in my ears. I knew, with a horrifying certainty, that I had made a terrible mistake. I had let it in. I had given it the blueprint to my sanctuary, the very place I thought was safe. I raced back to my apartment, my mind a whirlwind of panic and dread. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock the door. I burst inside, slamming the door shut and throwing the deadbolt, as if a few inches of wood and metal could stop what was coming. The air in my apartment was thick, heavy, colder than it should have been. The scratching was no longer just in my head, it was all around me, a dry, rasping sound that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, from the very fabric of the building. It sounded like something was trying to claw its way out, or in. I backed away from the door, my eyes scanning the room. The shadows seemed deeper, longer, twisting into unnatural shapes. The light from the window seemed to dim, as if something was absorbing it. I knew I could not stay. I had to run, again, but where? It knew this place now. It knew the layout. It had the map. As I stood there, frozen in terror, the air in the room dropped several degrees. A profound, sickening emptiness began to spread through me, a familiar draining sensation that started in my chest and radiated outwards. Then, from the darkest corner of my living room, the shadow began to coalesce. It was larger this time, more substantial, its gaunt form rising slowly, like smoke given malevolent intent. It moved with eerie familiarity, gliding through my living room, towards a small hallway that led to my bedroom, as if it had walked these exact paths 1,000 times before. It knew the layout. Chloe had given it everything it needed. And then, within its swirling, abyssal form, Sarah's face appeared, more vivid than before, more contorted in agony. Her eyes, wide with a terror that mirrored my own, fixed on me. And this time her lips moved. No sound came out, but I understood. It was a silent scream, a desperate warning. Her eyes flickered from me, to the shadow, then to the hallway, specifically toward my bedroom. It is coming for you. It knows your space. Do not sleep. The draining intensified. I felt my energy, my very life force, being siphoned away, leaving me weak, disoriented. The shadow lunged forward, stretching out a long skeletal arm towards me. I could feel its icy tendrils reaching for my mind, for my soul. I was paralyzed, utterly helpless, just like Sarah had been. But then a memory, a flash of pure, primal fear from that first encounter, surged through me. The TV static. The blinding, disorienting static that had repelled it before. I did not have a TV here, but I had my phone. With a desperate, superhuman effort, I clawed at my pocket, pulling out my phone. My hands were shaking, my vision blurring, but I managed to open the camera app, turning the flash on. It was a desperate, foolish gamble, but it was all I had. I aimed the phone, not at the entity itself, but at the wall beside it, hoping the sudden, blinding flash would have some effect. Click. Flash. The apartment was momentarily bathed in intense, artificial white light. For a split second, the shadow recoiled, hissing, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Sarah's face twisted in an expression of pure anguish, then relief, then it was gone. The draining sensation lessened, giving me a precious, fleeting moment of clarity. It was not enough to banish it, not entirely. The shadow was still there, flickering at the edges of my vision, but it had retreated, momentarily stunned. It was a reprieve, not a victory. I did not wait. I did not think. I just ran. I grabbed my keys, threw the door open, and stumbled out into the hallway, leaving everything behind. My phone, my wallet, my laptop, my meager belongings. They were just things. My life was all that mattered. I did not stop running until I was blocks away, gasping for breath, my lungs burning, my legs aching. I hailed a cab, and told the driver to just drive. Far, anywhere. As I stared out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks, the full, horrifying realization hit me. This thing, this entity, it was not just a mindless monster. It was intelligent. It was patient. It was learning. It had used Chloe, or its influence on her, to gather information about my new hiding place, to draw a map, to set a trap. It was not just hunting me, it was actively strategizing. The scratching sound was no longer a distant echo. It was a constant, gnawing presence in my mind, a chilling reminder that it knew my every move, my every attempt to hide. It was not just coming for me, it was planning for me. I am still running, still looking over my shoulder. But now, the terror is deeper, more profound, because I know that every new face I meet, every seemingly innocent conversation, every attempt to find a moment of peace could be another trap, another proxy, another step in its relentless, horrifying hunt. It does not just want to drain me, it wants to consume me, to absorb me, to add my face to its collection, just like Sarah. And it knows the layout of my last sanctuary. It knows how to find me. And I know, with a bone-chilling certainty, that it will come for me again. And again, until there is nothing left. All right, guys, settle in. Because this next one, this is a story of how I thought I would finally found a place to hide. A quiet corner of the world where I could just exist, breathe, and maybe, just maybe, start to forget. But I was wrong. So wrong. The thing that took Sarah, the thing that used Chloe to map my last sanctuary, it is not just a monster. It is a predator. And it learns. It plans. And it found me again, not by chasing me down the street, but by planting a seed of rot right in the foundation of my supposed safety. After I fled that coffee shop, after I saw Sarah's agonized face in that coalescing horror, after I used my phone's flash like some pathetic firefly, trying to ward off a storm I just ran, I did not grab anything. My wallet, my ID, my clothes, my laptop all gone. My life, what little was left of it, was back to zero. I was a ghost, a shadow flitting through bus stations and Greyhound terminals, heading anywhere the next ticket would take me. The terror was a constant companion, a chill that had nothing to do with the freezing bus AC. Every face I saw was a potential trap. Every casual glance a sign that it knew. I ended up in a small town, deep in the Appalachian foothills. No name you would recognize, just a cluster of forgotten houses around a single main street with a gas station and a diner that served lukewarm coffee. It was the kind of place people moved from, not to, and that suited me just fine. I needed to disappear, and this place felt like the perfect void. I paid cash for a week at a dingy motel, then spent my days walking, looking for something more permanent, something cheaper, something isolated. That is how I found the house. It was a rental, a 2-story relic on the edge of town, surrounded by overgrown woods, far enough from any other homes that I could scream my lungs out and no one would hear. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and the windows were grimy, but it had a yard, a broken fence, and most importantly, a heavy, solid front door that felt like a shield. The landlord, a gruff old man named Silas, who smelled permanently of pipe tobacco and dust, did not ask for much cash up front. No questions asked. He seemed more interested in getting rid of the place than vetting a tenant. Perfect. The first few weeks were a strange kind of peace. I bought a cheap air mattress, a couple of blankets, and a few cans of food. I kept the lights off, only using a battery-powered lantern at night. I spent my days reading old paperbacks I found in a dusty box in the attic, or just staring out the windows at the dense woods, watching the leaves sway. I was always listening, always waiting for that telltale scratching, that phantom touch. But nothing. The silence here was different. It was not the oppressive, watchful silence of my old apartment. It was a quiet of nature, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of unseen animals. I started to let my guard down, just a fraction. I even started to sleep for more than a couple of hours at a time. It felt like I was, finally, truly alone. The house had a basement. Of course, most old houses in this area did. It was just a crawl space, really, with a dirt floor accessed by a rickety wooden door in the kitchen. I had not even bothered to look in it when I moved in. It was just there, a dark, forgotten space beneath the floorboards. I figured it was for storage, maybe a root cellar. I had nothing to store anyway. My only real human contact came in the form of Mrs. Gable. She lived in the closest house, about a quarter-mile down the winding dirt road. She was an elderly woman, probably in her late 70s, with a shock of white hair and eyes that missed nothing. She would bring me a plate of cookies every now and then, or a slice of AP bow pie, always with a polite but probing question. Are you settling in all right? Dear, that old house needs a good cleaning. Does not it? Are you expecting any visitors? Each question was a tiny prick of paranoia, but I learned to smile and give vague answers. She seemed harmless enough, just a lonely old woman trying to be neighborly. One afternoon, I was out on the rickety porch, trying to fix a loose board, when Mrs. Gable shuffled up the road, a wicker basket over her arm. She stopped at the edge of my yard, squinting at the house. You know, dear, she said, her voice a little raspy, I have been meaning to ask you about something. My heart gave a familiar jolt. Here it comes. I braced myself. Yes, Mrs. Gable. I tried to sound casual. She tilted her head, sniffing the air. It is just, well, I have noticed a bit of a smell lately. Coming from your place. My breath hitched. A smell. I had not noticed anything. I was so used to living in a state of heightened alert. My senses were usually on overdrive. But a smell. Oh, I said, trying to play it cool. What kind of smell? She wrinkled her nose, like something's gone bad. A bit of decay, you know. Not like a dead animal, not quite. More earthy, but definitely not pleasant. She peered at me, her gaze surprisingly sharp. Are you sure you have not noticed it? I forced a laugh. Oh, it is probably just the old house. Mrs. Gable, it has been empty for a while. Probably some dampness. Maybe a mouse died in the walls or something. She did not look convinced. She just hummed a low, thoughtful sound and then changed the subject to the weather. But her words had already planted a seed of dread. Later that day, as I sat in the living room trying to read, I found myself sniffing the air. Was there a smell? I could not tell. My nose was either too used to the general mustiness of the old house, or my brain was just blocking it out, trying to protect me from another layer of terror. But the idea, the suggestion of decay, was enough. My paranoia, which had been dormant, flickered back to life, stronger than ever. That night, I could not sleep. Every creak of the old house, every rustle outside became magnified. Was that the smell? A faint, cloying sweetness that turned my stomach. Or was I just imagining it? The thought that something was decaying underneath me, in my supposed sanctuary, was unbearable. It felt like a subtle violation, a new form of intrusion. The next morning, I decided I had to check. I had to know. I pulled open the rickety wooden door on the kitchen floor, revealing a set of steep, narrow steps leading down into absolute darkness. A wave of cold, damp air washed over me, and then I smelled it. Oh, God, I smelled it. It was not overwhelming yet, but it was definitely there. A faint, sickeningly sweet stench, like something organic slowly breaking down, mixed with the damp earth and mildew of an old cellar. It was exactly as Mrs. Gable had described. Earthy, but definitely not pleasant. It was a smell of decay. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was not just a mouse. This was something else. My mind immediately went to the entity. Was this its doing? Had it somehow gotten here before me? Was this its way of announcing its presence? Or was it something more mundane, but still horrifying? A previous tenant's secret. I grabbed my battery-powered lantern and descended the steps. The light cut through the gloom, revealing a small, dirt-floored space. Cobwebs hung thick from the wooden beams overhead, and the air was heavy, stagnant. Old jars lined a dusty shelf, their contents long since evaporated or turned to sludge. A few rusty tools lay in a corner, forgotten. I walked slowly, my boots crunching on the loose earth. The smell grew stronger as I moved toward the back wall. It was concentrated there, a pungent cloud of putrefaction. My stomach churned. I held the lantern higher, sweeping its beam across the wall. Nothing, just rough-hewn stone and packed dirt. Then I saw it, in the far corner, tucked away behind a stack of rotting firewood. There was a patch of disturbed earth. It was darker than the surrounding dirt, and it looked fresh, like someone had recently dug there, and the smell was strongest right over it. It was almost unbearable. My throat tightened, and I had to clamp a hand over my mouth to keep from gagging. My mind raced. What could be buried here? A dead animal. Yes, that was the most logical explanation. But the entity, it was a strategist. It knew how to play on my fears. What if this was a trap? What if digging it up would unleash something worse? I stood there for a long time, the lantern shaking in my hand, the beam dancing across the disturbed earth. I wanted to run. I wanted to pretend I had not seen it, had not smelled it. But the thought of that decaying presence festering beneath my floorboards, slowly permeating my sanctuary, was a torment. I had to know. I went back upstairs, grabbed a rusty shovel I found in the shed, and returned to the basement. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the lantern. The smell was already starting to cling to my clothes, to my hair. It felt like it was seeping into my skin. I took a deep breath, trying to steel myself, and plunged the shovel into the disturbed earth. The soil was loose, surprisingly easy to dig. Each scoop brought up a fresh wave of the sickening stench. I dug carefully, slowly, my eyes scanning the darkness around me, half expecting the entity to coalesce in the shadows, to mock me as I unearthed its foul handiwork. About a foot down, the shovel hit something soft. Not bone, not rock. Something yielding, fibrous. My heart leaped into my throat. I dropped the shovel, grabbed the lantern, and knelt, frantically clawing at the dirt with my bare hands. What I uncovered was not a body, not a whole one. Anyway, it was a small wooden box, old, waterlogged, and rotting. The smell was emanating directly from it, a concentrated blast of decay that made my eyes water. I carefully lifted it out of the dirt. It was surprisingly light. The wood was so soft it crumbled under my touch. I managed to pry open the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of what looked like dried, crumbling leaves, were a few items. Not bones, not flesh, something far more insidious. The first thing I recognized was my old wallet, the one I would have before Sarah disappeared, before everything went to hell. It was stained and warped, the leather cracked and peeling, but it was unmistakably mine. I remembered buying it, a gift from Sarah. Actually, now it was here, rotting in a box under my house. Next to it was a small silver locket, Sarah's locket, the one she always wore, with a tiny, faded picture of us inside. It was tarnished beyond recognition, the silver blackened and corroded, the chain broken. The picture was just a smear of brown and black. And finally, at the bottom of the box, was a small, half-burnt photograph. It was a picture of Sarah and me, laughing, our arms around each other at some long-forgotten picnic. But the faces were gone, eaten away by something, leaving only distorted, decaying remnants. My blood ran cold. This was not a random burial. This was a message. A sick, twisted, deeply personal message. The entity had not just found me, it had been following me. It had collected pieces of my past, pieces of Sarah, pieces of us, and buried them here in my new sanctuary to rot. The smell was not just decay, it was a decay of my memories, my hope, my very identity. It was literally rotting away my past, making sure I could never forget what I had lost, or who was responsible. A cold dread, far deeper than any I had felt before, settled over me. The scratching sound, which had been absent since I moved here, suddenly echoed in my mind, sharper, more insistent than ever. It was not just in my mind anymore, it felt like it was coming from the walls, from the very foundation of the house. I scrambled out of the basement, dropping the box, leaving the shovel in the dirt. I slammed the wooden door shut, as if that flimsy barrier could keep the horror at bay. But the smell was everywhere now. It clung to me, to the air in the kitchen, to the entire house. It was not just from the box anymore. It felt like the house itself was decaying, rotting from the inside out. I stumbled into the living room, gasping for air, my mind reeling. My eyes darted around the room. The shadows seemed deeper, more alive. The silence, which had once been a comfort, was now a heavy, oppressive blanket, filled with the unspoken presence of the entity. Then I heard it, a faint whisper, like dry leaves skittering across a barren landscape. It was Sarah's voice, distorted, agonized. He is here. He is in the walls. He is in the earth. My blood ran cold. It was not just a message. It was a full-blown manifestation. The entity had used the basement, used those decaying remnants of my life, to establish a foothold. It was not just mapping my sanctuary. This time it was infesting it. The temperature in the room plummeted. My breath plumed in front of me. The scratching intensified, no longer just in my mind, but a physical sound coming from the walls, from the floorboards, from everywhere. It sounded like 1,000 razor-sharp claws dragging across wood, across bone. A dark, swirling mass began to coalesce in the corner of the room, just like before. Larger than before, more defined, and within its churning depths. I saw it again, Sarah's face. But this time it was not just agonized. It was accusing. Her eyes, hollow and black, seemed to bore into my soul. You let him hear her voice, a strangled whisper, echoed in my mind. You brought him to me. You brought him to us. My life force, that fragile spark of existence, felt like it was being siphoned away, just as it had been in my old apartment. I felt weak, dizzy, my knees threatening to buckle. The smell of decay was now overwhelming, filling my lungs, coating my tongue. It was not just a smell of rotting objects, it was a smell of death, of despair, of everything I had lost and everything I was about to lose. I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that this was it. This was where it ended. I had nowhere left to run. This house, this isolated sanctuary, was now a tomb, but then a flicker of defiance, a desperate, primal urge to survive. I had escaped before. I could escape again. My eyes fell on the battery-powered lantern I had used in the basement. It was sitting on the coffee table, still on. I remembered how the phone flash had momentarily repelled the entity before. Light. It hated light, with a surge of adrenaline. I grabbed the lantern, aimed it at the swirling mass, and clicked the switch, turning it to its brightest setting. The beam, though small, hit the entity directly. A shriek, a sound of pure, unadulterated hatred and pain, tore through the air. The swirling mass recoiled, shrinking back, its form flickering and distorting. Sarah's face contorted in a silent scream. The scratching sound momentarily ceased. It was a brief reprieve, a fraction of a second, but it was enough. I did not think. I did not grab anything. My legs moved on their own, propelling me toward the front door. I fumbled with the old deadbolt, my fingers numb with terror. The scratching resumed, louder, closer, as the entity began to recoalesce, its darkness spreading through the room. I yanked the door open and burst out into the fading daylight, not even bothering to close it behind me. I ran, down the sagging porch steps, across the overgrown yard, towards a dirt road. I did not look back. I could not. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs screamed in protest, until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in blood-red hues. I ran past Mrs. Gable's house, not even sparing a glance. I did not care if she saw me, if she thought I was crazy. All that mattered was putting distance between me and that house, between me and that thing. I am still running. I am huddled under a bridge now, miles from that cursed town, the cold night air biting at my exposed skin. I left everything again. My few possessions, my sense of safety, even a memory of a brief, illusory peace. The terror is deeper now. It is not just a fear of being caught, of being consumed. It is a crushing realization that there is no safe place, no hiding spot. The entity is not just a hunter, it is a torturer. It does not just want to take my life, it wants to dismantle my sanity, piece by piece, memory by memory. And the smell of decay. It is still with me. I can smell it on my clothes, in my hair, under my fingernails. It is in my nostrils, a phantom scent that I can't wash away, no matter how much I rub my face. It is a constant reminder that the entity is not just behind me, or waiting for me. It is inside me now, a part of me, a festering rot that it planted in my soul. I do not know where to go next. I do not know how to fight something that can literally rot away my past. Every new place I go, every new face I see, I know it is just another temporary reprieve, because it is out there. It is always out there, and it will come again. And next time, I do not think a simple light will be enough. Next time, I think it is going to finish what it started, and the smell of decay. That will be the last thing I ever truly know. All right, so where do I even begin? It feels like an eternity since I last spoke, or rather, since my thoughts formed coherent enough sentences to even try to make sense of anything. The last time, I was running, just running, miles from that house, that cursed patch of earth, that box of decaying memories. I thought I was free, or at least that I would bought myself some time. But you know how it is with these things, right? There is no outrunning a predator that is already inside you. The smell, man, it is the first thing you notice, and the last thing you forget. That foul, earthy decay, like something ancient and dead, had just clawed its way out of shallow grave. It clung to me, sure, but it was not just on my spectral clothes or in my non-existent hair. It was in me. Like that thing, that entity, had planted a seed of rot right in the middle of my non-beating heart. Every breath I did not take, every phantom pulse, just spread that putrid stench through my very essence. It was a constant reminder, a festering wound in my soul. I kept moving, drifting through forgotten back roads, over hills shrouded in mist, through towns that looked like they were given up on the modern world decades ago. But there was no peace, no quiet. Every shadow was potential threat, every whisper of wind, a mocking voice. My guard was up, higher than ever before, but what good is a guard when the enemy is already behind your eyes? The loneliness that was the real killer. Even as a ghost, an echo, a memory of man, the need for connection still clawed at me. Sarah was gone. My life was gone. My very existence was a cruel joke. And in that desperate hollow space, something insidious began to take root. A craving. a longing for something, anything that felt normal, that felt human. It started subtly, a flicker, an impression, like a half-remembered dream. I was drifting through a small town, a place called Blackwood Creek, barely a dot on the map. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone and outsiders were eyed with suspicion. I was just passing through, a wraith among the living, when I saw it. A young woman, sitting on a park bench, engrossed in her phone. And on that phone, a familiar interface. A dating app. It was like a jolt. A phantom jolt, but a jolt nonetheless. A memory from a life that felt a million years away. The swipe, the profile, the little dopamine hit of a match. God, I remembered it all. A stupid, trivial thing, but in that moment, it felt like a lifeline. A whisper of what it was like to be. That is when the entity started to play its new game. It did not manifest as a swirling darkness or Sarah's, accusing face this time. No, this was far more cruel. It began to build a cage around my mind, using my own desires as the bars. I was still running, still adrift, but now a new kind of consciousness began to surface. It was like I was dreaming, but awake. I could still perceive the physical world, the decaying leaves on the ground, the chill of the mountain air, but superimposed over it, a new reality began to form. A screen, a digital interface, flickering and distorted, right there in my spectral vision. It was a dating app. My dating app. Or what looked like my dating app. The familiar logo, the clean lines, the profile pictures. It was all there, a perfect illusion. It preyed on that desperate, aching loneliness. It promised an escape, a connection, a way back to something resembling normalcy, even if it was just in my head. I do not know how I interacted with it. I do not have fingers anymore, or a physical body to tap a screen. But it was like my thoughts, my intentions were enough. A phantom swipe, a mental tap. It was all so seamless, so real that for a while, I almost forgot I was a ghost hunted by an ancient horror. Almost. I started swiping. It was a strange, disorienting experience. Faces would appear, then vanish with a thought. Some were blurred, others perfectly clear. I was not looking for anything specific, just a flicker of recognition, a spark, anything to break the crushing silence of my new existence. And then, I saw her. Her profile picture was a warm, slightly blurry selfie taken outdoors, sunlight catching her auburn hair. Her name was Serafina. Her bio was Simple Love's old books, Rainy Days, and Finding Beauty in Forgotten Places. Something about it resonated with that part of me that still remembered Sarah, that still longed for gentle companionship. It felt safe, familiar. I swiped right, and instantly, a notification popped up, shimmering in my spectral sight as a match. For a moment, a genuine, albeit phantom, warmth spread through me. It was a fleeting echo of a feeling I had not experienced in what felt like centuries. Hope, a dangerous thing. I know, especially for someone in my predicament, but I was so starved for it. I clung to it like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood. We started chatting. Her messages were thoughtful, articulate, and surprisingly insightful. She asked about my interests, my past, my dreams, things I had not dared to think about since everything ended. I found myself pouring out my heart, not about being a ghost or the entity, of course, but about the feeling of loss, of being adrift, of the quiet desperation for something real. I twisted my story, made it vague, spoke of a terrible accident and losing everything. She seemed to understand. She empathized. I know what it is like to feel lost, she typed, her words appearing in my mind's eye like glowing embers. To feel like a piece of you is missing, but even in the darkest corners, there is always a flicker of light if you know where to look. Her words were a balm, a temporary reprieve from the constant dread. I found myself looking forward to her messages. They were the only thing that quieted the internal stench of decay, The only thing that made the constant, oppressive presence of the entity feel a little less suffocating. But even as this fragile connection grew, there were anomalies, disturbances, the decay smell, which had briefly receded into the background, would sometimes intensify when I was reading her messages. It was subtle at first, just a faint whiff, but it would grow, like a phantom miasma rising from the words themselves. And then there were the details. Little things she would say. It sounds like you've been through a lot, like you are carrying a heavy burden, almost like a ghost of your former self. Or, I have a feeling you are drawn to forgotten places. Do not you? Old, isolated houses on the edge of the woods. Perhaps my blood, if I still had any, would have run cold. How could she know that? I never mentioned the house, the woods, or anything specific about my spectral existence. I just chalked it up to coincidence, to her being perceptive, or perhaps to my own paranoid mind projecting things. But the unease was a constant, low hum beneath the surface of our conversations. One time, she asked me, "Do you ever feel like you are being followed? Like something is always just out of sight, watching you, waiting?" I remember freezing. The digital interface in my mind flickered violently. The words blurred. The decay smell hit me like a physical blow, a suffocating wave of putrescence. I tried to dismiss it, to type a casual response, but my phantom fingers felt frozen. Just a bit of paranoia. I guess. I finally managed to project. She replied, almost instantly, "Oh, I do not think it is paranoia at all. Some things that just stick to you, do not they? Like a shadow you can't shake off. Or a locket you can't let go of." That was it. That was the moment the fragile illusion shattered. The locket. Sarah's locket. The one I found in the rotting box, buried in the basement of that house. The one that was a piece of my past, my torment. How in God's name could she know about that? It was not in my profile. It was not something I would ever mention, even in my vague, generalized confessions. My spectral form trembled. The app interface in my mind began to distort, the colors bleeding, the text shimmering like heat haze. This was not just a dating app. This was not just a human connection. This was it, the entity. It had found a new way to torment me, to play with my last vestiges of hope. I tried to end it. I tried to mentally block her, to delete the app from my perception, to simply will it away. But it was like trying to close your eyes on a nightmare. The interface remained glued to my inner vision, flickering with an ominous light. I sent her one last message, a desperate attempt to sever the connection. I think this is not going to work out. Serafina, I appreciate your understanding, but I need to focus on myself right now. I wish you all the best. Her reply was immediate, and it was not a polite farewell. "Oh, you think you can just leave me?" The words were no longer glowing embers. They were jagged, red-hot spikes, burning through my consciousness. After all we have shared, after I have shown you such kindness. The decay smell was overwhelming now, thick and cloying, filling my entire being. It felt like I was drowning in it. You do not get to just walk away. Her next message appeared, each letter dripping with malice. Not from me, not from us. Then came the pictures. Not of her, but of me. Or what looked like me. A blurry, spectral image of my ghost form, standing in the doorway of that dilapidated house. Another, of me drifting to the woods, my form translucent against the trees. And then, a close-up, a horrifyingly clear image of Sarah's tarnished locket, lying in the disturbed earth of the basement floor. My breath caught in my throat, a ghost of a gasp. This was not just a stalker. This was the entity, showing me it was always watching, always there, even in the deepest recesses of my mind. You thought you were alone, did not you? Serafina's message continued, the text now black and writhing, like worms on a corpse. You thought you could hide. You thought you could forget. Oh, sweet little ghost. I never forget, and I never let go. The threats began. They were not vague or generic. They were chillingly specific. I know where you are right now. I can feel your fear. It is delicious. That little town you are in, Blackwood Creek, it has so many forgotten corners. So many dark places for a little ghost to get lost in forever. You want to forget Sarah, to move on. I won't let you. I will make sure her face haunts your every waking moment. I will make sure you hear her screams over and over again until you beg me to stop. And that house your sanctuary. I have made it mine. Every plank, every shadow, every speck of dust remembers you. And it remembers me. I have planted new seeds there, little surprises for when you inevitably come back. Because you will come back. You always do. The messages came in a rapid fire, torrent, each one a fresh stab to my already fragile psyche. It was not just words anymore. As I read them, the world around me began to twist. The trees outside my mental window seemed to writhe, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for me. The air grew heavy, thick with that pervasive stench of decay, now mixed with something else, something metallic and acrid like old blood. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my spectral throat. I tried to run, to drift away, but the digital screen, the menacing messages, they were everywhere. They were branded onto my very being. You think a simple light will save you this time. Her message mocked me, echoing the very fear I had felt just hours ago. Oh no, my dear. Light can't banish what is already inside you. It can't burn away the rot I have sown. Then, the manifestations began to bleed into my physical perception. Not just in my mind, but in the actual world around me. I was drifting near an old, abandoned church, its steeple crumbling, its windows boarded up. As her messages intensified, the boards on the windows began to creak, then groan. Then finally, one by one, they tore away from the frames with splintering shrieks, revealing gaping, black eyes staring out at me. The old wooden door of the church, long sealed shut, slowly began to open, revealing nothing but an impenetrable blackness within, a darkness that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. And from that darkness, a whisper, not Seraphina's voice, but my voice, distorted and echoing, calling Sarah's name. I will take everything from you. Her final message appeared, glowing with an infernal light. Your memories, your sanity, your very essence. You will be nothing but a vessel for my torment, a perpetual scream in the void. You are mine now, and this is where it truly ends. The screen in my mind exploded in a blinding flash of putrid green light, and then it was gone. But the horror was not over. It had just begun. The whispers from the church intensified, becoming a chorus of torment. Sarah's screams, my own desperate pleas, the sound of the earth being disturbed, the creak of the rotting box. All of it swirled around me, an auditory vortex of my worst nightmares. The decay smell was no longer just a smell. It was a tangible presence, a suffocating shroud that wrapped around my spectral form, pressing in, crushing me. It felt like tendrils of black rot were growing out of my non-existent skin, intertwining with the very air, pulling me down into an abyss of despair. I saw her then. Not Seraphina, not the digital avatar, but the entity itself. It was not a swirling darkness anymore, not just a shadow. It had taken on a form, a grotesque amalgamation of everything it had stolen from me. It was tall, impossibly gaunt, its limbs too long, too thin. Its face was a shifting canvas of suffering, a kaleidoscope of Sarah's accusing eyes, my own terrified expression, the leering grin of pure malevolence. It stood at the entrance of the abandoned church, its form filling the doorway, blocking out any lingering light. It did not move towards me. It did not need to. It simply extended a hand, a skeletal, decaying claw, towards me, and from its fingertips thin black tendrils like wisps of smoke began to snake out, reaching for me. I tried to fight to pull away, but my spectral form felt heavy, weighed down by the rod it had planted within me. The tendrils touched me, not physically, but spiritually. I felt them invade my essence, burrowing into my core, entwining with the festering seed of decay already there. It was not painful in a physical sense. It was worse. It was a complete, utter violation of my very being. I felt my memories being siphoned away, not erased, but twisted, corrupted. Sarah's face, once a source of bitter longing, now became a horrifying mass of accusation and disgust. My past, once a source of phantom pain, now became a playground for the entity's cruel machinations. The words from the app, Seraphina's threats, they echoed in my mind, no longer just messages, but a new reality. You are mine now. I was no longer just a ghost being hunted. I was a ghost being consumed. The dating app, that brief, cruel flicker of hope, had been nothing but a sophisticated trap, a digital fishing net cast by a cosmic predator. It had reeled me in, played with my deepest desires, and then, when I was completely vulnerable, it had devoured me whole. I do not know where I am now. I am still here, still perceiving, but it is all changed. The world is a blur of decay and torment. The entity is everywhere, its presence not just external, but woven into the very fabric of my shattered consciousness. I am no longer running. There is nowhere to run to, and nowhere to run from. The rod it planted in my soul has blossomed, and I am its eternal, screaming flower. This is not where it ends. This is where the real ending begins, and I fear it will never truly finish. Not for me. Not ever. All right, so you know how sometimes you just want to unwind, blow off some steam after a long week. That was me a few months back. Just your average Friday night, nothing special planned. My friend, Chloe, had bailed on our usual movie night, so I decided to hit up this new bar that had just opened downtown. It looked pretty swanky, exposed brick, craft cocktails, the whole 9 yards. I figured, why not? Maybe meet someone new, or just enjoy a quiet drink alone. Big mistake. Biggest mistake of my life. I remember walking in, the place was buzzing, a little too loud for my taste, but I found a spot at the bar, ordered a gin and tonic. I was just scrolling through my phone, kind of people watching, when this guy slides onto the stool next to me. He was charming, I guess, not drop-dead gorgeous, but he had this easy smile and intelligent eyes. We started talking, just casual stuff at first. He told me his name was Liam. He was an architect, apparently, working on some big project across town. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, and honestly, after a week of dealing with demanding clients, it was a nice change of pace. We talked for maybe an hour, hour and a half. He bought me a second drink, then a third. I was not usually one to overdo it, especially alone, but the conversation was flowing, and I felt comfortable. Maybe a little too comfortable. He was a good listener, and he had this way of making me laugh. Like a genuine belly laugh. I had not done that in a while. At some point, he suggested we move to a quieter place, maybe a different bar, or just somewhere we could actually hear each other talk. I hesitated for a second. My inner alarm bell, the one that usually screams stranger danger, was kind of muffled by the gin and tonic, and honestly, by how charming he was. He seemed so normal, so safe. He even pulled out his phone and showed me pictures of his cat, a fluffy ragdoll named Muffin. Who could say no to a guy with a cat named Muffin? So, I agreed. Just one more drink. I remember saying, then I gotta head home. That is the last thing I remember clearly. The next thing I knew, it was not the soft glow of my bedside lamp or the familiar scent of my apartment. It was nothing. Just a crushing, absolute blackness. My eyes snapped open, but it did not help. It was still pitch black. I tried to move, but my head was throbbing like a drum solo was happening inside my skull. My mouth felt like sandpaper, and there was this metallic taste, like I would have been sucking on pennies. Panic started to bubble up, cold and sharp. Where was I? What happened? I pushed myself up, my hands flailing in the dark. My fingers brushed against something cold, rough, and unyielding. Concrete. I felt around, slowly, cautiously. Walls. All around me, walls. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. This was not my apartment. This was not a hotel room. This was not anywhere I recognized. I fumbled for my phone. Nothing. My purse. Gone. My keys. My wallet. All gone. Just the clothes on my back. A simple black top and jeans. Dread, cold and heavy, settled in my stomach. This was not just a bad hangover. This was something else entirely. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of fumbling, my hand hit something. A light switch. I flicked it. The sudden burst of light was blinding, harsh. I squeezed my eyes shut, groaning, then slowly opened them again, letting them adjust. The room was small, maybe 10 by 10 feet. The walls were bare, unpainted concrete, stained with what looked like old watermarks and something darker, rust-colored in places. The floor was the same rough concrete. There were no windows. None. My breath hitched. In one corner, there was a thin metal cot, like something you would find in a military barracks, with a threadbare blanket folded neatly on top. In another corner, a rusted, bolted-down toilet and a small, equally rusted sink. That was it. No furniture, no decorations, no personal items. Just a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting a sickly yellow glow. And the door. Oh, God, the door. It was solid steel, thick and heavy, with no handle on the inside. Just a small, square peephole, covered from the outside by a sliding metal plate. My blood ran cold. I was not just in a strange room. I was in a locked room. Panic clawed its way up my throat. I ran to the door, slamming my fist against the cold metal. Hello? Is anyone out there? Let me out. My voice sounded hoarse, weak, pathetic in the enclosed space. I kicked at the door uselessly. It did not budge. Not an inch. It was like kicking a mountain. I pressed my ear against it, straining to hear anything. Silence. Absolute, oppressive silence. It was so quiet I could hear the frantic beat of my own heart, the blood rushing in my ears. It was the kind of silence that screams louder than any noise. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I forced them back. Crying would not help. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what the hell was going on. Liam. The bar. The one more drink. Oh, God, he must have drugged me. But why? What did he want? I started systematically checking the room. I ran my hands over every inch of the concrete walls, looking for a crack, a loose panel, anything. Nothing. Solid. Impenetrable. I tried to pull the cot away from the wall, thinking maybe there was something hidden behind it. It was bolted down. The sink, the toilet, all bolted down. This room was designed to hold someone, designed to keep them in. My eyes scanned the ceiling, hoping for a vent, a trapdoor, anything. Just concrete, except for the bare bulb, which was encased in a metal cage, screwed tightly into the ceiling. Even the light source was secure. Hours passed, or maybe it was just minutes. Time lost all meaning in that windowless box. My throat was raw from yelling, my knuckles bruised from pounding. Exhaustion started to set in, but the fear kept me wired, buzzing with adrenaline. I slumped against the wall, sliding down to the cold floor. My head was still pounding. I was thirsty, so thirsty it hurt. I tried the sink. Nothing, not a drop of water. They had not even given me that. That is, when I noticed something on the wall, near where I was sitting. Faint, almost invisible against the rough concrete, were scratches. Tiny, desperate lines, as if someone had been trying to count the days, or hours. My eyes followed them, a chaotic mess of marks, some deep, some shallow. And then I saw it, scratched just above a cluster of marks. Barely legible, he is watching. My blood ran cold again, this time a deeper, more profound chill. My gaze shot to the peephole in the door. It was just a black square. But was it always black? Or had someone just moved the cover back into place? Had someone been watching me the entire time? Watching me panic, watching me cry, watching me search for an escape. The thought made my skin crawl. I curled into a ball, hugging my knees to my chest. The silence pressing on me, heavy and suffocating. I imagined eyes on me, unseen, cold eyes. My mind raced, trying to piece together a motive. Was it ransom? But who would pay for me? I was not rich, did not have any powerful connections. Was it some kind of sick revenge? But I did not have any enemies that I knew of. Then a sound, a faint click. My head snapped up. It came from the door. My heart leaped into my throat. Was someone coming? Was this it? The sliding metal plate on the peephole slowly, almost imperceptibly, moved. A sliver of light appeared, then widened. I froze, staring at the small opening, my breath caught in my chest. I could not see anything clearly, just a blur, a shadow, an impression of an eye. But it was there. Someone was watching. I scrambled back, pressing myself against the far wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. I did not want them to see my fear, but it was impossible to hide. My entire body was trembling. The peephole cover slid back into place with another soft click. Silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was a knowing silence, a predatory silence. More hours passed. I drifted in and out of terrified doze, my body aching, my mind a swirling mess of fear and confusion. At some point, I heard a faint clatter outside the door. Then, a small slot, cut into the bottom of the steel door, slid open. A small plastic plate was pushed through. On it, a single piece of dry bread and a small plastic cup of water. Food, water, a lifeline, but it also confirmed my worst fears. They were not going to let me go. They were going to keep me here. I stared at the bread and water for a long time. My stomach growled, my throat burned, but the thought of eating something from them made me sick. What if it was drugged? What if it was a trick? But the hunger, the thirst, was overwhelming. Eventually, my survival instinct kicked in. I snatched the cup, gulping down the water. It was lukewarm, metallic tasting, but it was water. I devoured the bread, dry as sawdust, but it filled a gnawing emptiness in my stomach, if only for a moment. The slot clanged shut. I was alone again. Days blurred into an agonizing cycle. The light would stay on for what I assumed was daytime, then switch off at night, plunging me back into darkness. The bread and water would appear at seemingly random intervals. I tried to keep track of the days by scratching marks on the wall, just like the previous occupant, but it was hard. My sense of time was completely warped. I started to notice more things on the walls. Not just scratches, but faint drawings. Crude, childish stick figures. Some of them looked like people. Some looked like monsters. One drawing, etched deeper than the others, showed a stick figure crying, with another, larger stick figure standing over it, holding something that looked like a knife. My stomach clenched. Had someone else been here before me? And what happened to them? The fear grew, evolving from raw panic into a cold, gnawing dread. I was trapped, and whoever had me, they were playing a game. A sick, twisted game. One day, a new item appeared through the slot. Not food. It was a small, worn teddy bear. Its fur was matted, one eye missing, and it smelled faintly of mildew. My first thought was, what the hell? My second thought was, this is a child's toy. I picked it up, my fingers brushing against the coarse, matted fur. It felt wrong, like it carried a history of pain. Why would they give me this? Was it a message, a warning, or just another layer of psychological torment? I tried to use the teddy bear to communicate. I scrawled a message on it with a piece of the dry bread, using the soft crumb to create faint letters. Who are you? Why am I here? I pushed it back through the slot, hoping for a response. Hours later, the teddy bear was pushed back, but it was not just a bear. Tucked under its arm was a small, folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, precise, almost childlike. You are here because you were chosen. The game has begun. My blood ran cold. The game. He had said it. My fears confirmed. This was not about ransom. This was about something far, far worse. What game? I screamed at the door, my voice cracking. What do you want? No response. Just the silence. The next day, a single blunt pencil appeared through the slot, along with a blank notepad. And another note. You have a choice. Lie with me, or die alone. Your first task, write your story. Every memory, every secret, every detail. Do not hold back. I know when you lie. I stared at the note, my mind reeling. Write my story. Every secret. He wanted to know everything about me. He wanted to own me, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. He wanted to strip away every last piece of who I was. The thought of revealing myself to this monster, this unseen captor, made me sick. But the alternative, die alone. The words echoed in my head. Die alone in this concrete box. Starved, forgotten. The terror was immense. I picked up the pencil, my hand shaking so violently I could barely hold it. I started to write. I wrote about my childhood, my family, my first crush, my dreams, my regrets. I wrote about everything I could remember, trying to be as honest as possible because the note said, I know when you lie. How could he know? Was he watching me even now, reading my thoughts? The paranoia was suffocating. I wrote for hours, days maybe. My fingers cramped, my eyes burned. I filled page after page, pouring out my entire life onto the paper. It felt like I was bleeding myself dry, giving him everything he wanted. When I finished, I pushed the notepad and pencil back through the slot. It disappeared. The next day, a different note came back. Good, but not enough. You have forgotten something. Something important. I will give you a hint, Sarah's locket. My heart stopped. Sarah's locket. My grandmother's locket. It was a small, silver heart-shaped locket that I always wore, a family heirloom. I had not worn it to the bar that night. I would left it on my nightstand. How did he know about Sarah's locket? How could he possibly know? The chilling realization hit me like a physical blow. He was not just watching me. In this room, he knew things about my life. Things that only someone who had been in my home or had somehow researched me extensively could know. Liam. He must have followed me or found my address. My mind reeled back to the bar, to our conversation. Had I mentioned where I lived, what I did, anything that could have given him a lead? I could not remember. The gin and tonics had done their job too well. The implications were terrifying. This was not a random act. This was planned. I was targeted. And he knew me. He knew me. The next note was even more disturbing. You lied about your deepest desire. You crave connection. You crave to be understood, to be seen. But you are afraid. You push people away. Tell me, what truly haunts you? What is the putrid smell you try to escape? My blood ran cold. The putrid smell. That was a phrase I would use in my private journal, describing my own feelings of inadequacy, my fear of not being good enough, of being fundamentally flawed. No one else knew about that. No one. This was not just research. This was something else. This was supernatural. Or he had been in my house reading my journal. Either way, it was a violation so profound it made me want to scream until my lungs gave out. He was not just a captor, he was a mind reader. Or he was inside my mind. I felt like I was going insane. The walls of the room seemed to press in on me. The silence roared in my ears. I was trapped, not just physically, but mentally. He had seen into my soul, exposed my deepest fears and insecurities. I wrote again, this time with a frantic, desperate honesty I had not thought possible. I poured out the truth about my loneliness, my fear of genuine connection, the self-loathing I usually hid behind a cheerful facade. I wrote about the putrid smell as a metaphor for my internal decay, my anxieties. When the note came back, it was short, chillingly simple. Good. Now you understand. This is not a game of escape. This is a game of surrender. Your final task, choose your instrument. Below the words, there were two crude drawings. One was a small, jagged piece of metal, like a shard of glass. The other was a thick, knotted rope. My stomach churned. Choose my instrument. He was not talking about music. He was talking about self-harm. He wanted me to choose how I would inflict pain upon myself, or how I would end my life. No, I would not. I could not. I slid the note back through the slot, defiantly. I won't do it. I screamed, my voice raw. You can't make me. The slot remained closed. The silence was absolute. Hours crawled by. The lights switched off, then on again. No food, no water. Just the oppressive silence and the terrifying choice hanging over me. My body ached, my head throbbed. My throat was so dry it felt like I was swallowing razor blades. I began to hallucinate. I saw shadows moving in the corners of the room, heard whispers that were not there. The drawings on the wall seemed to twist, the stick figures becoming animated, their eyes following me. The teddy bear, still lying on the floor where I would dropped it, seemed to stare at me with its one remaining button eye, a silent, matted witness to my torment. The hunger and thirst became unbearable. My resolve began to crack. He knew my weaknesses. He knew my deepest desires. He knew how to break me. Then a new sound, not from the door, from the ceiling, a faint scraping, like something dragging across concrete. My eyes darted up. A small section of the ceiling, directly above the cot, began to move. Slowly, silently, a square panel slid open, revealing a dark, gaping hole. And from that hole, something descended. It was not a rope. It was not a shard of metal. It was a bundle of wires, thick and black, dangling down. And at the end of each wire, a sharp metallic hook, like fishing hooks, but bigger, meaner. And as they slowly lowered, I could see they were stained. Dark, reddish-brown stains. Dry blood. My breath caught in my throat. This was not a choice between a shard and a rope. Those were just a distraction, a psychological trick. This was the real instrument. A voice, distorted and echoing, filled the room. It was not Liam's voice. It was deeper, colder, devoid of any human warmth. It sounded like static electricity, mixed with gravel. The game is not about choosing your end, the voice rasped, vibrating through the concrete. It is about choosing your surrender. Your story was good, but I need more. I need to feel it. I need to taste it. I need to become it. The hooks swayed gently, catching the dim light, glinting with their rusty stains. My mind screamed. He wanted to hook into me, to literally extract my essence, my memories, my pain, to consume me. I scrambled backwards, away from the cot, away from the dangling hooks. My back hit the cold wall, and I slid down, my legs giving out. I was sobbing now, openly, uncontrollably. This was it. There was no escape. The voice continued, a chilling monologue that seemed to seep into my very bones. You are a vessel, a conduit. Your fear, your loneliness, your desire for connection, it is exquisite, and I will feast upon it. The hooks began to descend faster, swaying wildly now like hungry metallic tendrils. I could feel the air around them, cold and heavy, pressing down on me. The putrid smell, the one I had written about, the one that represented my internal decay, was suddenly real. It filled the room, a sickening stench of rot and something vaguely metallic. It was a scent. It was the smell of the entity that was about to consume me. I closed my eyes, bracing myself, my body trembling uncontrollably. I could feel the air stir as the hooks drew closer, closer. I could feel the cold metal brushing against my skin, the sharp points pricking at my flesh. A scream tore from my throat, raw and primal, as the first hook pierced my skin. Then another, and another, a searing, agonizing pain ripped through me. But it was not just physical. It was as if something was being pulled from me, an invisible thread connecting my very soul to these cruel instruments. My memories flashed before my eyes, not as a dying person's last moments, but as vivid, agonizing sensations being yanked, torn, consumed. I felt myself unraveling, my essence being siphoned away, my consciousness fading in and out. The last thing I heard, before the darkness finally claimed me, was the rasping voice, closer now, almost a whisper in my ear, thick with perverse satisfaction. Welcome home. I am no longer running. I am no longer screaming. I am just here, a hollow space where a person once was, a collection of stolen memories, a vessel for an insatiable hunger, and the putrid smell. It is not just around me anymore. It is inside me. It is me, and it will never, ever go away.